Chapter 15:14. Coach, take a rest first. There's no need for you to take action against such a minor character, Ming Xiu said as he walked over. Ming Xiu understood from the side that Book Immortal and company were led by Berserk Sword Immortal. Since Berserk Sword Immortal hadn't moved, Ming Xiu didn't wish for Zhou Wen to appear weak. Furthermore, after seeing Feng Qiuyan's battle, he himself also felt a little itchy, wanting to try out his own comprehension. Zhou Wen nodded slightly as Ming Xiu stood in front of Book Immortal. He said with a faint smile, "You don't have to be afraid. Although I'm learning from Coach, I'm much weaker than the previous one. My sword is also much slower than his saber. As long as your reaction isn't too bad, you should be able to withstand it." Book Immortal no longer underestimated his enemy like Painting Immortal. Although the possibility of another Feng Qiuyan appearing was relatively low, there weren't many existences like Feng Qiuyan among humans. Among the 6 families, it was already impressive for each family to produce 1 or 2. Zhou Wen was alone. It was already shocking to have Feng Qiuyan by his side. It was truly unbelievable that there was another expert at the same level. Even so, Book Immortal didn't underestimate his enemy. He thought to himself, he and that person named Feng Qiuyan were both taught by Zhou Wen. Although one uses a saber and the other uses a sword, they probably take the same path. They should focus on speed. Even if he's bluffing me, his actual sword techniques are faster than Feng Qiuyan's. As long as I don't underestimate my enemy like Painting Immortal, I can withstand it. Book Immortal understood what was going on. Just as he was about to say something to Ming Xiu, he suddenly saw Ming Xiu draw his sword and stab. The sword was unbelievably fast, almost as fast as Feng Qiuyan's saber. Ming Xiu's sword speed wasn't slower than Feng Qiuyan's saber. In fact, the first few strikes were slightly faster than Feng Qiuyan's. However, Feng Qiuyan was a battle maniac. The more he fought, the stronger he became. This was something Ming Xiu didn't have. If Ming Xiu wanted to defeat Feng Qiuyan, he typically had to think of a solution in the first few strikes. After 5 strikes, if he couldn't defeat Feng Qiuyan, there was basically no need to continue fighting. He would definitely lose. When Book Immortal saw how fast Ming Xiu's sword was, he couldn't help but sneer inwardly. No matter how scheming you are, it's useless in front of absolute strength. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, the Book Immortal summoned a book in his hand. The pages of the book opened up and faced Ming Xiu's sword. Once the sword was caught by the book, the words in the book would be imprinted on the sword, sealing the sword's power. In the end, humans only know how to take advantage of some cheap tricks. The Book Immortal watched as his book was about to catch Ming Xiu's sword. However, in the next instant, the Book Immortal's eyes widened. He had clearly calculated the speed and timing, and the Book of Sealing was just in time to catch Ming Xiu's sword. However, when he closed the book, he realized that Ming Xiu's sword was slower than he had expected. He had already closed the book, but Ming Xiu's sword had yet to arrive. The Book Immortal wanted to open the book again, but it was already too late. The sword that seemed to be a beat slower suddenly increased in speed and flashed past like a stream of light. Puff! Ming Xiu's sword stabbed into the Book Immortal's chest. The Book Immortal watched helplessly as the sword pierced his face, but his body couldn't dodge. This was because his strength was restricted by the ancient corpse, preventing him from using his fastest speed. He couldn't dodge the sword that was already so close to him. After Ming Xiu's strike succeeded, he instantly retreated. As he advanced and retreated, he was elegant and smooth. It was like a piece of art that was pleasing to the eye. The Book Immortal wanted to severely injure Ming Xiu at the risk of suffering the strike, but he didn't have the chance. Ming Xiu had already retreated, leaving behind a wound on his chest. As there was no blood in the ancient corpse's body, although his wound looked terrifying, no blood flowed out. This situation had already been noticed by Zhou Wen and company when Feng Qiuyan injured the Book Immortal. "Thank you for thinking so highly of me. I already said that my sword is very slow. You don't have to be so fast. If you were a little slower, you would have been able to block it." Ming Xiu's sword had already returned to its scabbard as he stood there and said coolly, The Book Immortal was even more depressed than the Book Immortal from before. At the very least, the Book Immortal had used his painting ground imprisonment art. However, the Book Immortal hadn't used any of his abilities. He had been defeated for no apparent reason. Apart from feeling depressed, the Book Immortal and company were even more surprised. Without a doubt, Ming Xiu was also one of the most talented humans like Feng Qiuyan. However, such human experts were top-notch existences in the other major factions on Earth. For example, the Holy Spirit Societies Ye and the League of Defenders Xian were existences that even the Dimension knew of. Even if Ming Xiu and Feng Qiuyan were weaker than Yan Xian, they weren't much weaker. Even Berserk Sword Immortal found it unbelievable that such people were Zhou Wen's students. He originally imagined that Zhou Wen was the weakest among Wang Mingyuan's disciples. After all, Zhou Wen was alone while the others had their own massive factions. But now, from the looks of it, just Ming Xiu and Feng Qiuyan had made Zhou Wen a force that couldn't be underestimated. Interesting. Only then did Berserk Sword Immortal seriously size up Zhou Wen. Although Berserk Sword Immortal hadn't advanced to the Apocalypse stage, he had once defeated one. He did have the strength and qualifications to look down on Zhou Wen and Earth. Originally, Berserk Sword Immortal only wanted a puppet. As for Zhou Wen himself, he wasn't too interested. But now, Berserk Sword Immortal had no choice but to seriously examine Zhou Wen. To be able to teach students like Ming Xiu and Feng Qiuyan, Zhou Wen's strength didn't seem to match the information he had obtained. The zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting immortals looked at each other, momentarily at a loss as to what to do. Before coming here, they didn't even think much of Zhou Wen. They believed that any one of them could suppress him. However, now that two immortals had taken action, they had been defeated by Zhou Wen's students. Even though their strength had been suppressed, it still made them feel ashamed. The Zither Immortal and Chess Immortal hesitated and didn't take action. The calligraphy and painting immortals weren't weaker than them. If they couldn't even defeat Zhou Wen's students, how could the Zither Immortal and Chess Immortal dare to challenge Zhou Wen? They had seen the scene of Zhou Wen using a companion beast to kill the white snake with their own eyes. Their current bodies weren't stronger than the white snake's. If the ancient corpse's body was destroyed and exposed to Earth, their bodies would suffer serious injuries. The four immortals couldn't help but cast their gazes at Berserk Sword Immortal. After all, Berserk Sword Immortal was in charge on this trip. They were only assisting him, so they still had to wait for him to make the decision. Berserk Sword Immortal looked at Zhou Wen and company. He wasn't as depressed as the four immortals. Instead, he was somewhat excited. The stronger the people around Zhou Wen, the faster he could establish a new immortal strength after he controlled them. Now, the strength that Zhou Wen and company displayed was almost enough to fight the League of Defender. These people are mine. Berserk Sword Immortal stared at Zhou Wen with a burning gaze. Chapter 15:15. You said so much, but it turns out that's all. Do you want me to play with you? So that you can go home in peace. Li Xian's heart itched when he saw that Feng Qiuyan and Ming Xiu were in the limelight. He wanted to be in the limelight as well, so he jumped out and said to Berserk Sword Immortal. Li Xian's appetite was much greater than Feng Qiuyan and Ming Xiu's. He wanted to finish off the leader, Berserk Sword Immortal. Zither Immortal and Chess Immortal were enraged. They wanted to rush out to teach Li Xian a lesson, but they were stopped by Berserk Sword Immortal. All right, I'll play with you. Berserk Sword Immortal's voice was calm and even had a hint of a smile. However, killing intent had already risen in his heart. He knew that it was impossible to easily subdue Zhou Wen and company today. He needed absolute strength to suppress them, and Li Xian was his way of taking them down a notch. Make your move, Berserk Sword Immortal said to Li Xian as he stood there casually. Although they were both ancient corpses, Berserk Sword Immortal's ancient corpse was stronger than the four immortals. It could continuously produce strength at the mortal level and could barely produce strength at the hell level. Furthermore, Berserk Sword Immortal's realm far exceeded his peers. Even if he could only produce strength at the mortal level, his combat strength wasn't something ordinary mortal experts could compare with. By letting Li Xian attack first, he was giving Li Xian a chance to strike. "I'm afraid I'll kill you with one punch. Why don't you make the first move?" Li Xian stood as still as a mountain as he said proudly. At the same time, he thought to himself, "You are still too inexperienced to posture in front of me. When it comes to posturing, I've never lost to anyone." "Is that so?" Berserk Sword Immortal's eyes narrowed as they landed on Li Xian. Clang! Li Xian's eyes suddenly widened as though they were about to pop out. He opened his mouth and spat out blood as his body curled up like a shrimp. At some point in time, Berserk Sword Immortal was already standing in front of him as he struck his chest with one hand. Bam! Li Xian's chest caved in as he flew out like a cannonball. He slammed into the wall, causing it to collapse. His body plowed out a deep ravine that was hundreds of meters long. Because the speed was too fast and the friction was too strong, the soil and bricks in the deep trench were smoking. The broken parts of the steel bars were dark red, as if they had been burned by fire. "It's finally quiet. Now, we can have a good chat," Berserk Sword Immortal said to Zhou. The surrounding people had long been alarmed by the commotion, but with the soldiers blocking them, no one could come over. They could only watch from afar. "What do you want to talk about?" "I'll accompany you." A voice rang out from the deep ravine, causing Mad Sword Immortal to be slightly taken aback. Cray Sword Immortal turned his head and saw Li Xian walk out of the deep ravine. His armor was tattered, but there were no injuries on his exposed chest. His strong chest and abdomen were exposed, smooth and majestic. He was so perfect that he didn't look human, but like a marble statue. "To be able to take a palm strike from me and not die, you should be proud of yourself," the Wild Sword Immortal said. Li Xian walked over step by step and stared at Berserk Sword Immortal. "Your strength isn't bad, but it's still too soft. You could try using more strength." When Berserk Sword Immortal heard Li Xian's words, his eyes darkened. His figure broke through the sound barrier as a huge crater blasted open in the ground. Li Xian wanted to block it, but he was ultimately too slow. Once again, he was pressed against his chest by Berserk Sword Immortal. However, this time, Berserk Sword Immortal's strength didn't send Li Xian flying. Li Xian was still standing where he was, but the terrifying force seeped into his body, instantly shattering his bones and organs. Berserk Sword Immortal elegantly retracted his palm and waited for Li Xian's body to turn into mush. He was very confident in his strength. Although Li Xian's body was very strong, his Yin force could even reduce a mortal creature to mush. Berserk Sword Immortal stood there waiting for Li Xian to collapse, but after a while, Li Xian remained standing there without moving. He didn't show any signs of collapsing, nor did he bleed from his 7 orifices. This made Berserk Sword Immortal feel that something was amiss. "Is that all you have? I told you to use more strength. Why is it even softer than the first palm strike? Did you not eat? Do you want to eat something before continuing?" Li Xian looked at Berserk Sword Immortal and said provocatively. The 4 immortals looked at Li Xian in astonishment. They knew of Berserk Sword Immortal's immortal vanquishing palm. Although Berserk Sword Immortal's palm force wasn't as terrifying as his sword, it didn't mean that his palm force wasn't strong. On the contrary, the immortal vanquishing palm was extremely sinister. Very few creatures of the same level could withstand the Yin force of the immortal vanquishing palm. Berserk Sword Immortal had already used his calamity-grade strength, but he failed to kill Li Xian. Furthermore, Li Xian didn't look injured. This left the 4 immortals in disbelief. They even suspected if this was a dream. The 4 immortals looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. Before they came, they had never imagined that things would turn out like this. They originally believed that it wouldn't be difficult to suppress a powerless Zhou. However, the people who appeared beside Zhou were each more terrifying than the last. Even the League of Defender and the Holy Spirit Society might not have so many terrifying figures. What the hell? Where did these people come from? Why isn't there any information on them? What are those fellows from the League of Defender doing? Painting Immortal said angrily. Immortal must be behind it. He deliberately didn't report it, Zither Immortal said. However, Chess Immortal shook his head and said, "That shouldn't be the case. If they are really famous, even if the League of Defender doesn't report it, it's impossible for there to be no news from the Holy Temple. If there's no news from the Holy Temple, it only means that they aren't very famous." The Dimension's attention to humans was at most those who were especially famous, like Xian, Ye, or Zhang Chuanxiu from the Zhang family. Only then could they catch their attention. Although Ming Xiu and Feng Qiuyan were somewhat famous in the Federation, they hadn't reached that level. There was no need to mention Li Xian. When he was at home, outsiders basically only knew that Li Mabai was the helmsman of the Li family. When he went out, he was always with Shouwen. He basically had no chance to perform. Outsiders didn't know that there was a figure like the Li family's third young master. But in fact, even Zhong Zia and Qin Yin might not have full confidence in defeating Li Xian. Berserk Sword Immortal's eyes turned serious as he looked at Li Xian and said, "For a human to be able to cultivate the Khanate Holy Temple's invincible Khanate divine art to such a level, you aren't bad. Unfortunately, it's ultimately an incomplete counterfeit. Ignoring a fake Khanate invincible divine art like yours, even if you master the true Khanate invincible divine art, you won't be able to survive if I want to kill you." Chapter 15-16. Li Xian. Zhouwen could already tell that Berserk Sword Immortal's strength was extremely terrifying. He was definitely not at the mortal realm. Although Li Xian's body was extremely powerful, there was ultimately a limit. Zhouwen was afraid that something would happen to him, so he wanted him to return. There was no need for him to take the risk. However, Li Xian interrupted Zhouwen and said with a smile, "How can I share half the city with you if I don't perform well? Watch my performance. I won't disappoint you." Zhouwen looked into Li Xian's eyes and understood what he meant. Li Xian had clearly realized that Berserk Sword Immortal was extraordinary. He wanted to use him as a target to force Berserk Sword Immortal to showcase his strength, allowing Zhouwen a chance to observe from the side and gain a better understanding of his enemy. Li Xian didn't mean for Zhouwen to take a good look at him, but at Berserk Sword Immortal. "I don't know what's real or fake. I only know that you're a weakling who only knows how to spout nonsense. If you have the ability, kill me." Li Xian suddenly released his strength and punched at Berserk Sword Immortal's nose. He purposely did not summon the Planet Devourer, as he had already realized that the Planet Devourer would not be able to withstand the Berserk Sword Immortal's power. If he summoned it, it might even be destroyed. Berserk Sword Immortal had an arrogant personality to begin with. Despite knowing that Li Xian was trying to infuriate him, he was still filled with killing intent when Li Xian provoked him. Berserk Sword Immortal didn't have any qualms, nor did he need to tolerate it. At the instant Li Xian rushed in front of him, he pointed out with his finger. It was so fast that Li Xian couldn't even see his finger move. His finger had already touched his forehead. Thousands of sword beams erupted from Crazed Sword Immortal's fingertips as they surged towards Li Xian's body like a river of stars. Berserk Sword Immortal was planning on reducing Li Xian to dust. Under the sword beam that resembled a galaxy, his body was torn into tiny pieces. No matter how strong his body's self-healing abilities were, it was impossible for him to recover under such circumstances. Berserk Sword Immortal wasn't lying. Even a Terragrade creature that cultivated the complete version of the invincible Khanate divine art would definitely be reduced to dust by his sword stream. Its self-healing ability was useless. The sword beam rushed into Li Xian's body as his entire body lit up. It was as though his body had become a holographic projection. The sword light, which was like a river of stars pouring down, rushed straight through his body. Zhouwen activated the minor heavenly cycle slaughter array that he had set up ahead of time. The sword beams constantly circled a radius of hundreds of meters, but none of them flew out. Is this Imperial Lord Polestar's heavenly cycle array? Painting Immortal was given a fright when she saw Zhouwen's minor heavenly cycle killing array. Although his power was also spatial energy, it was still far from being comparable to the Sky Domain Grand Formation. It's not the heavenly cycle array. It's a little different, but it's already very similar. Furthermore, there are some special powers combined with it. Strange, this is really strange, the chess immortal said with an odd expression. He had done a lot of research on the Great Sky Domain formation. Now that he was in the middle of the formation, it was easy for him to see some clues. However, Zhou Wen's minor heavenly cycle killing array was somewhat different from the major heavenly cycle array. Chess immortal couldn't fully understand it. Bang! Everyone suddenly heard the sound of a fist colliding with flesh. When they turned their heads, they saw Li Xian's fist strike Berserk Sword Immortal's face. It distorted Berserk Sword Immortal's face as he staggered and nearly fell to the ground. The four immortals' faces were filled with disbelief. Berserk Sword Immortal had actually been punched in the face by a human. It was unimaginable. That was Berserk Sword Immortal, one who had once defeated an epigenic stage expert. Although he was restricted by his ancient corpse body and could only maintain strength at the mortal stage, it was still difficult for them to accept such an outcome. In fact, this couldn't be blamed on Berserk Sword Immortal. He had always believed that Li Xian was an incomplete pseudo-invincible Khanate divine art. He knew very well the path of the invincible Khanate divine art. It was an existence with an invincible body. However, he never expected that Li Xian's incomplete, invincible Khanate divine art would open up a brand new world. It was already very different from the true, invincible Khanate divine art. There were almost two completely different primordial energy arts. When Li Xian's body digitized, the sword beam failed to injure him. Berserk Sword Immortal believed that it was a phantom, but in fact, it was Li Xian's true body. Be it the calligraphy and painting immortals or Berserk Sword Immortal, they subconsciously looked down on humans. If they were fighting dimensional enemies, even if it was a phantom, Berserk Sword Immortal wouldn't allow the other party to approach him. However, after his sword beam failed to injure Li Xian, he didn't retreat immediately, allowing Li Xian to punch him in the face. After Li Xian's punch succeeded, he didn't show any mercy. He used his fists and feet to attack Berserk Sword Immortal. However, before his fists and feet could land on Berserk Sword Immortal, a sword beam suddenly erupted from Berserk Sword Immortal's body like a volcanic eruption. This sword beam was somewhat different from the previous one. It was the color of blood. The blood-colored sword beam spewed out and rushed into the sky. When Li Xian's digitized body touched the blood-colored sword beam, he was corroded by it. His hands and legs turned blood red and quickly exploded. Alarmed, Li Xian hurriedly retreated, but the speed at which he retreated couldn't keep up with the speed at which the blood-colored sword beam spread. His body was about to be engulfed by the blood-colored sword beam. His terror transformation ability didn't really transform him into an ethereal hologram. Even a true hologram wasn't completely void. In fact, it was made up of particles. As for Berserk Sword Immortal's sword beam, it was already so fine that it could destroy neutrinos. Li Xian's terror transformation was unable to survive such a sword beam. At the instant Li Xian was about to be engulfed by the sword beam, Zhou Wen teleported behind Li Xian, grabbed his body, and teleported him out of the minor heavenly cycle killing formation. And in the minor heavenly cycle killing formation, Berserk Sword Immortal slowly turned his face back and stood up straight. The sanguine beam in his eyes was like a blade as the blood-colored sword beam on his body constantly erupted. He was like a berserk demon god. After being slapped in the face by Wang Mingyuan, Berserk Sword Immortal was on the verge of going berserk. If it wasn't for the interests of the entire immortal race, he would have killed Wang Mingyuan at all costs. However, Wang Mingyuan was the Dragon King after all. He was also the leader of the 8 divisions. He had some status in the dimension, so Berserk Sword Immortal could barely tolerate it. Now, a Terragrade human had actually slapped him in the face. This made Berserk Sword Immortal instantly go berserk. As the blood-colored sword beam erupted from his body, the ancient corpse's body began to crack. The minor heavenly cycle killing formation was filled with large amounts of blood-colored sword beams as the circular space formed by the array formation was constantly torn apart. Lord! The 4 immortals cried out in horror as they released their strength to block the blood-colored sword beam. They were still in the minor heavenly cycle killing formation, so they were the first to bear the brunt of the terrifying sword beam that erupted from Berserk Sword Immortal. Chapter 15-17. The minor heavenly cycle killing array is about to be torn apart. Zhou looked at the terrifying sword beam that filled the entire minor heavenly cycle killing array. Even though the minor heavenly cycle killing array space could be cycled, the space inside the array was limited. The other party's sword beam was already so powerful that it could fill all the space. It was only a matter of time before the minor heavenly cycle killing array was torn apart. Where did this fellow come from? He's so terrifying. Li Xian's injuries rapidly healed, and he had almost recovered. However, he still felt a little shaken. If Zhou would have been any slower, his self-healing abilities would have been useless no matter how strong he was. Thankfully, you made him reveal his true strength in advance, giving us time to prepare. Now, we can still think of a solution. Otherwise, the consequences would be unpredictable. Zhou truly felt that Li Xian had done well. If Li Xian hadn't forced Berserk Sword Immortal to such a state, giving Zhou a chance to understand his abilities and set up the minor heavenly cycle killing array ahead of time, the consequences would have been unimaginable. If Zhou had really fought Berserk Sword Immortal and Berserk Sword Immortal suddenly used such power, few humans nearby would have survived even if Zhou could dodge it. I'm not good at anything else, but when it comes to getting beaten up, no one would dare to claim first place if I claim to be second, Li Xian said smugly. Don't be smug. Evacuate the crowd first. My minor heavenly cycle killing array won't last long, Zhou said to Li Xian. The minor heavenly cycle slaughtering formation was on the verge of collapse. Blood-like, sword light constantly seeped out from the cracks on the formation. Everything that came into contact with the blood-red sword light, be it plants or rocks, was instantly dyed red before exploding. Zhou knew very well that it wasn't really dyed red, but because the blood-like sword beams were just too tiny, they could bore through objects and destroy their particles, resulting in such a visual effect. Li Xian, Feng Qiuyan, and company went to evacuate the crowd. Without waiting for the minor heavenly cycle killing array to completely shatter, Zhou summoned the golden flood dragon scissors and made it transform into a golden beam that slashed at Berserk Sword Immortal. Berserk Sword Immortal had already seen the might of the golden flood dragon scissors. When he saw the golden flood dragon scissors fly over, he immediately formed a sword seal with his finger and pointed at the golden flood dragon scissors. With his finger pointing, the blood-like sword beams surged towards the golden flood dragon scissors like a tidal wave. Ding! The sound produced by the collision lasted for a long time. The bloody sword gleam kept hitting the golden jiao scissors, but couldn't penetrate the golden jiao scissors. Even the sword gleam, which was as small as neutrinos, couldn't penetrate it. The golden flood dragon scissors swam against the current and opened its scissors blades. Like a pair of scissors cutting through a red cloth, the scissors forcibly tore a hole in the bloody sword light and slashed toward the Berserk Sword Immortal with unstoppable force. Berserk Sword Immortal was slightly surprised. He had already unleashed his Hellgrade power, but he was still unable to block the golden WIRM scissors. All he could do was dodge the golden WIRM scissors attack. On the other side, the ancient corpses of the four immortals, Qin, Qi, calligraphy, and painting, were already in tatters. Part of them were destroyed by Mad Sword Immortal's sword light, and the other part was forced to erupt with a powerful force. Their ancient corpses couldn't withstand it and were torn apart by their own power. Bang! The instant the Berserk Sword Immortal dodged the golden flood dragon scissors, he heard a gunshot. A bullet arrived in front of him, heading straight for his head. However, before the bullet could reach Berserk Sword Immortal, it was shattered by the bloody sword beam. Zhou set up his sniper rifle on the collapsed wall and fired 6 consecutive shots at Berserk Sword Immortal. However, the 6 bullets were shattered by the bloody sword beam. They couldn't approach Berserk Sword Immortal at all. Instead, the might of Berserk Sword Immortal's bloody sword beam increased tremendously. It completely tore apart the minor heavenly cycle slaughter array that was already on the verge of collapse. The bloody sword beams that blotted out the sky surged out like a sea of blood that enveloped the world. Qin, Qi, Shu, the four immortals also rushed out. However, at this moment, their ancient corpses were almost completely destroyed. Their bodies were suppressed by the laws of Earth. One by one, their bodies trembled and let out painful moans. It was as if invisible chains were strangling their bodies, making it difficult for them to move. Strange sounds came from their throats as if they were about to suffocate. Zhou could clearly sense that their powerful auras were rapidly weakening. These fellows come from a dimension. Zhou immediately understood that they weren't creatures of Earth. Otherwise, they wouldn't have suffered such severe rejection and oppression. Although the four immortals were under immense pressure, the pressure wasn't enough to kill them. It only caused their life grades to constantly drop. They who were originally at the Hell grade instantly fell to the Calamity grade. Their strength was only at the Terror grade, and it was constantly dropping. Berserk Sword Immortal was the exact opposite. His bloody sword beam became more and more terrifying. The ancient corpse's body was already cracking like a withered field, but it didn't truly collapse. Berserk Sword Immortal didn't waste any time on the Golden Flood Dragon Scissors. As he dodged the Golden Flood Dragon Scissors attack, he controlled the bloody sword beams that filled the sky to sweep towards Zhou from all directions. This was because the bloody sword beams were just too terrifying. They were almost everywhere, enveloping more than half of Guide City. The tops of the tall buildings were the first to come into contact with the sword beams and were destroyed. The buildings began to turn red from the top before exploding. The sword beams that resembled a sea of blood constantly pressed down as though the apocalypse was upon them. People cried out in fright or tried their best to escape, but under such terrifying power, ordinary people couldn't escape at all with their speed. All they could do was wait for death. Zhou could escape, but if he did, the hundreds of thousands of people in Guide City would be instantly wiped out. Although they were human, the entire city would be completely destroyed, leaving nothing behind. Zhou held his sniper rifle and continued aiming at Berserk Sword Immortal, ignoring the bloody sword beams that filled the sky. Bam! The seventh shot sounded as a bullet shot out from the barrel, piercing through the bloody sword beams like a beam of light. The seventh shot was a sure kill shot. This was a sure kill shot that had all the strength of the Golden Sniper. The bullet shuttled through the bloody sword beams in a frenzy, but unlike the previous 6 bullets, it wasn't shattered by the bloody sword beams. This bullet had the power to kill. It struck the bloody sword beams alone, but the bloody sword beams were just too powerful. The sure kill 7th shot was struck by the tidal wave of bloody sword beams as it slowed down. It looked like it was about to stop. The Golden Flood Dragon Scissors flew over and tore through space in front of the bullet as it charged at Berserk Sword Immortal. The bullet tore through the space created by the Golden Flood Dragon Scissors and once again shot at Berserk Sword Immortal at light speed. Berserk Sword Immortal's figure flashed once again as he dodged the Golden Flood Dragon Scissors attack. As for the sure kill 7th bullet, it automatically made a turn and continued pursuing Berserk Sword Immortal. The 7th star in the Venus Dimensional Zone might be a sure kill to others, but to me, such strength is still too weak. Berserk Sword Immortal recognized the origins of the 7th bullet. At the instant the bullet arrived in front of him, it was caught by his fingers. The bullet spun between his fingers like a drill bit, but it was unable to advance another inch. Chapter 15:18. Berserk Sword Immortal exerted strength again. The sure kill bullet couldn't continue spinning under the pressure of his powerful strength. The bullet constantly trembled, but it couldn't move at all. Under the terrifying force of his fingers, it was as though it was about to be squashed flat. The Golden WIRM Scissors attacked again. All Berserk Sword Immortal could do was dodge again, unwilling to fight the Golden WIRM Scissors head-on. At the same time Berserk Sword Immortal dodged, the bullet in his hand transformed into an ancient mirror. Berserk Sword Immortal's reaction was already very fast. He threw the ancient mirror in his hand, but he was too close to it. The light spewing out from the ancient mirror still shone on him. When the strange light shone on Berserk Sword Immortal, his body and the bloody sword beams that filled the sky suddenly vanished. They vanished completely, leaving nothing behind. The horrified people looked at the sky in a daze. If it wasn't for the fact that the buildings had less than half their height left, they would have thought that the terrifying sea of blood sword beams was just a dream. Zhou extended his hand, and the soul-revealing mirror returned to his hand. There was a sanguine glow in the mirror, as though blood was about to seep out of it. Cracks began to appear on the originally smooth mirror surface, and they were rapidly spreading. "I'll leave this to you," Zhou roared at Li Xian, Feng Xiuyan, and company before using his interstellar teleportation ability to vanish with the soul-revealing mirror. Li Xian, Feng Xiuyan, and Ming Xiu understood what Zhou meant and immediately rushed towards the four immortals. The four immortals' faces turned livid. They hadn't done anything, but their ancient corpse bodies had been destroyed by Berserk Sword Immortal. Their bodies were severely suppressed by Earth's laws, so they could barely maintain the standard of the Terror Grade. However, they had barely reached the standard of the Terror Grade. They originally imagined that no one could withstand Berserk Sword Immortal's explosive strength, but to their surprise, he had vanished for no apparent reason, leaving the four of them to groan inwardly. They had seen the strength of Li Xian and company. If they were in the dimension, it would be too easy to kill them, but in their present situation, it was unlikely they could defeat them. When Zhou teleported to Dubby's star, the cracks on the soul reflection mirror were like spiderwebs. It looked like it was about to shatter. Without any hesitation, Zhou picked up the soul illumination mirror and shone it at Dubby. The soul illumination divine light shone on Dubby, and the Berserk Sword Immortal and the bloody sword beams that filled the sky appeared once again. However, he didn't appear in Guide City, but in the boiling liquid of Dubby. Explosions of light were constantly happening around him, as though countless hydrogen bombs were exploding around him. Zhou originally imagined that the terrifying explosion of light on Dubby would be able to affect Berserk Sword Immortal and even damage his body. But who would have thought that the blood sword light around Mad Sword Immortal's body would withstand the high temperature, radiation, and energy explosion, protecting his body as he rushed out from the Dubby star. What a terrifying fellow. Zhou knew that Berserk Sword Immortal was definitely suppressed by the rules of hell. His true strength wasn't limited to this. To be able to unleash such power under such circumstances was truly terrifying. After Berserk Sword Immortal rushed out, he didn't attack Zhou immediately because he was certain that Zhou was good at spatial teleportation. If Zhou were to teleport away now, he wouldn't be able to do a thing to him. "Zhou, let's make a deal," Berserk Sword Immortal said as he stood amidst the blood that splattered everywhere. "What deal?" Zhou wasn't in a rush to leave as he asked Berserk Sword Immortal calmly. "You are the Thief King, right?" Although Berserk Sword Immortal said it as a question, his tone was certain. "What does it matter if I am or not?" Zhou knew that the exposure of his spatial powers had made Berserk Sword Immortal link him to the Thief King. "Indeed, it doesn't matter. Your spatial powers are very powerful. Even in the dimension, there aren't many people at the same level who are stronger than you." Berserk Sword Immortal paused before continuing. "It's true that I can't kill you here, but even if you can escape, your family won't be able to escape. Your friends and the hundreds of thousands of people from Guide City won't be able to escape either." "Are you threatening me?" Zhou said coldly as he looked at Berserk Sword Immortal. "I'm just stating a fact. Don't you think so?" Berserk Sword Immortal asked. "What are you trying to say?" Killing intent rose in Zhou's heart. He was a person who rarely had killing intent. Even when facing an opponent who wanted to kill him, Zhou could still calmly do what needed to be done. This was because he knew very well that the other party was his enemy. It was very normal for them to want to kill him. There was no need to be angry. However, Berserk Sword Immortal was different. His actions were no longer as simple as an enemy. "Let's cooperate. From now on, You will be my race's spokesperson in the human world, Berserk Sword Immortal said. Which race are you from? Zhou asked. If you're willing to cooperate, you will naturally know in the future. Berserk Sword Immortal didn't answer Zhou. What if I don't cooperate? Zhou asked. Anyone related to you will die. Berserk Sword Immortal said coldly. Zhou suddenly laughed happily. Berserk Sword Immortal stared coldly at Zhou and said, Is it that funny? If you weren't proficient in spatial powers, killing you wouldn't be difficult. Although I can't kill you now, your family and friends don't have spatial powers like yours. Killing them is just too easy. It's as easy as pinching an ant to death. Zhou stopped laughing and looked at Berserk Sword Immortal with a sharp gaze. You're right. It's indeed very easy for you to kill them. It's good that you know. Then what's your choice? Do you want them to die? Or do you want to cooperate with me? Berserk Sword Immortal asked Zhou. I don't want them to die, nor do I want to cooperate with you, Zhou said calmly. You have no other path. You can only choose one of the two, Berserk Sword Immortal said coldly. However, Zhou shook his head and said, Of course I have another path. Oh, what is it? Berserk Sword Immortal asked. As long as I kill you, all the problems will be resolved. This is the third path. As Zhou spoke, he summoned the golden WIRM scissors again. However, this time, Zhou held the golden WIRM scissors in his hand and didn't let it attack by itself. The golden WIRM scissors was very powerful. It was at the hell stage to begin with. Zhou's strength was far inferior to the golden WIRM scissors, but the golden WIRM scissors' strength alone wasn't enough to kill Berserk Sword Immortal. Chapter 15:19. Berserk Sword Immortal remained as cold as ever. He wasn't angered by Zhou's words. Zhou's actions were exactly what he wanted. His Calamity Domain had immense offensive power, but it didn't stop Zhou from using spatial teleportation. He was most afraid that Zhou would escape. Now that Zhou planned on fighting to the death instead of escaping, it was naturally what Berserk Sword Immortal wanted. Come on if you want to kill me. Give it a try with all your might. Berserk Sword Immortal extended his hand and beckoned. The sanguine sword flashes that filled the sky gathered towards his palm. Thousands of sanguine sword flashes instantly condensed together, forming a sword of blood that Berserk Sword Immortal held in his palm. Although it was easier to kill Zhou by using a sword flash that resembled a sea of blood, Berserk Sword Immortal's goal wasn't to kill him, but to make him submit. The ancient corpse's body couldn't withstand Berserk Sword Immortal's descent for long. Now that it had suffered such serious injuries, Berserk Sword Immortal didn't have much time left. He had to choose a new spokesperson for the immortals in the human world before he returned. It was probably too late to find someone else. Furthermore, Berserk Sword Immortal didn't believe that there was anyone more suitable than Zhou to be the new spokesperson. Zhou held the golden flood dragon scissors and closed its blades together, using it as an unsharpened greatsword. Zhou and the golden flood dragon scissors fused as one, transforming into a stream of light that stabbed at Berserk Sword Immortal. It wasn't that Zhou didn't want the sword to follow him, but the golden flood dragon scissors' strength was far greater than his. If he forcefully made the golden flood dragon scissors follow his strength, it would only weaken the golden flood dragon scissors' strength. Therefore, Zhou chose to use his strength to assist the golden flood dragon scissors. Man as support, sword as master. If an ordinary person were to use such a sword technique, it would be inevitable that they would be at a disadvantage. This was because the person who practiced the sword was human. Man as master and sword as support was the correct path. If the sword was the master, the person would be controlled by the sword. It was equivalent to entering a demonic path, and it was easy for something to happen. Berserk Sword Immortal's figure moved slightly and dodged the golden flood dragon scissors attack. He slashed the sword in his hand at Zhou's head and said, Your ability isn't bad, but your character isn't. The sword Tao is the Tao of the heart. Your heart is driven by the sword. How can a heartless person become a true expert? Berserk Sword Immortal clearly believed that Zhou's way of using the sword was too clumsy. It wasn't a superior sword Dao. However, Zhou ignored Berserk Sword Immortal as he constantly attacked Berserk Sword Immortal. Even though Berserk Sword Immortal had condensed the Sword of Blood, he didn't dare clash head-on with the golden WIRM scissors. All he did was constantly dodge, attempting to defeat Zhou with his Sword Dao techniques. However, as time passed, Cray Sword Immortal was surprised to discover that he was unable to suppress Zhou. The golden WIRM scissors was very powerful, but Zhou Wen's own strength hadn't reached that level. However, under Zhou Wen's use, the might produced by the golden WIRM scissors was much stronger than when the golden WIRM scissors fought alone. Berserk Sword Immortal was surprised to discover that although Zhou Wen seemed to be using him as a support, he could use a tiny amount of strength to affect the golden Flood Dragon scissors through some details. It looked like the golden WIRM scissors was in charge, but in fact, Zhou Wen was controlling everything. A human can actually cultivate the sword principle to such a level. Since the Berserk Sword Immortal was known as a Sword Immortal, his attainments in the Sword Dao were naturally extremely high. He had already seen where the problem lay. However, Zhou Wen's sword techniques today surprised him. He wasn't able to gain the upper hand in a pure Sword Dao battle. What sword technique is this? Berserk Sword Immortal asked as he fought Zhou Wen. A sword technique doesn't necessarily need a name. Zhou Wen's heart-defying sword art was born from the 3,000 sword intent. He could freely use any sword technique style. However, the situation with the golden WIRM scissors was somewhat special. It wasn't a real sword, so Zhou Wen had to use a special method to control it. It was very different from the sword techniques Zhou Wen usually used. Berserk Sword Immortal originally wanted to quickly defeat Zhou Wen, but after seeing Zhou Wen's sword techniques, he had the urge to watch more. He didn't immediately fight Zhou Wen with all his might. Berserk Sword Immortal was a fanatic of the Sword Dao. When he saw an exquisite sword technique he didn't know of, he couldn't help but watch a little longer. Zhou Wen had already pushed the golden WIRM scissors' strength to its limits. His body constantly teleported with the golden WIRM scissors, but all his attacks were dodged by Berserk Sword Immortal. The Sword of Blood in Berserk Sword Immortal's hand similarly failed to injure Zhou Wen. Moments later, Berserk Sword Immortal suddenly said, "Your sword techniques aren't bad. Unfortunately, you haven't truly mastered them. Today, I'll show you what true sword techniques are." With that said, Berserk Sword Immortal's hand that held the Sword of Blood stabbed at Zhou Wen's heart. It was so fast that Zhou Wen couldn't see it clearly. Before Berserk Sword Immortal's Sword of Blood reached Zhou Wen's chest, he had the illusion that his heart had been pierced. Zhou Wen brandished the golden WIRM scissors to block, but just as the golden WIRM scissors moved, the Sword of Blood had already changed its position and stabbed at Zhou Wen's glabella. Berserk Sword Immortal fought Zhou Wen purely with his sword techniques. After more than 10 strikes, Zhou Wen was forced to retreat without any room to counterattack. Berserk Sword Immortal's sword techniques could no longer be described as domineering. At the very least, there were traces of domineering. He was domineering when he needed to be domineering, and he had to be restrained when he needed to be. However, Berserk Sword Immortal's sword techniques were completely different. He was domineering where he needed to be domineering, and he was still domineering where he shouldn't be domineering. It was as though he didn't care about his life. Every strike of Berserk Sword Immortal was aimed at the enemy's vitals, forcing them to protect themselves or retreat. There was no chance for them to counterattack. Zhou Wen actually knew such a sword technique that attacked the enemy to save himself, but he quickly realized that the two weren't the same thing. He had used such a method to deal with Berserk Sword Immortal, but he nearly lost his composure a few times. When Berserk Sword Immortal faced his opponent, he really didn't dodge. However, it wasn't that he didn't have any flaws. It could even be said that he had many flaws. Furthermore, he didn't think much of them. All he cared about was killing his enemy, ignoring the flaws in his sword techniques. He kept attacking. This shouldn't be called a sword technique. It was more suitable to call it a gamble with one's life. Now, Zhou finally understood what it meant to be domineering. Berserk Sword Immortal's sword techniques were domineering. Instantly, Zhou held a divine weapon like the golden WYRM scissors, but he was constantly retreating under Berserk Sword Immortal's attacks. He couldn't gain the upper hand in a battle of pure sword Dao. It had been a long time since Zhou was at a disadvantage in such a battle. His heart-defying sword art was rarely suppressed in such a manner. He never expected that there would be another sword technique that wasn't included in the 3,000 sword intent. Chapter 1520. Berserk Sword Immortal gave Zhou the feeling that he was an upgraded version of Zhongzia. He was equally crazy and domineering. Although their sword techniques were different, the way they used swords was very similar. They used swords differently from ordinary people. If using a sword was like driving a car, when an ordinary person saw something happening in front of them, their first reaction would be to slow down, but they would choose to speed up and rush over before the road was blocked. If his judgment was accurate and he was fast enough, he would be able to pass through. However, if they made a mistake in judgment, or if their speed was not fast enough, the car would crash and they would die. However, Berserk Sword Immortal was a super veteran. In a thrilling battle, he was able to rush over before Zhou could seal off his opponent. This made Zhou very passive. Firstly, Zhou's speed wasn't as fast as Berserk Sword Immortal. Secondly, the golden WYRM scissors wasn't a real sword to begin with. It was also a little too big, making it unsuitable for speed. Thankfully, Zhou's teleportation was already extremely powerful with the augmentation of the disqualified. Coupled with his movement technique and the disqualified's ability to automatically sense the enemy's weakness, it wouldn't be easy for Berserk Sword Immortal to defeat Zhou with his sword. Mad Sword Immortal was equally shocked. He was the dignified Mad Sword Immortal, a Heaven Realm Sword Dao expert who had once defeated an Apocalypse Realm existence. Now that he had the advantage in strength and speed, he found it difficult to truly suppress Zhou. Zhou's Sword Dao and combat strength far exceeded his expectations. A Terra-grade human can actually cultivate his Sword Dao to such a level. How many such humans are there on Earth? Berserk Sword Immortal was somewhat worried. In the past, humans were limited by their own flaws. After so many years, their growth was still very limited. Now, it had only been a few years since they broke through the limitations, but there were already many Ren Huang, Wang Mingyuan, and Zhou. If humans were to continue growing like this, even if the boundary between Earth and the dimension was broken one day and dimensional creatures were no longer suppressed by Earth's universe laws, it would be a problem if they could still suppress Earth's humans. I need to quickly establish a power on Earth that can control the human race. I need to control the human race. The blood sword in Mad Sword Immortal's hand became increasingly wild. Zhou could clearly see the sword thrusting at him, but every time he used the golden Flood Dragon scissors to block it, he would be a little slower. He was unable to touch Berserk Sword Immortal's sword. Even a minor heavenly cycle killing array was unable to completely block the bloody sword. More and more wounds appeared on Zhou's body. Didn't you want to kill me? Come on. How can you kill me if you keep retreating? Attack! Berserk Sword Immortal taunted as he attacked. Zhou didn't say a word as he continued fighting Berserk Sword Immortal. Even though his injuries increased, he didn't use any other companion beasts. Using a companion beast could indeed give Zhou some breathing room, but it couldn't help him obtain victory. If he only wanted to preserve his life, Zhou could teleport away now, but that wasn't what he wanted. The disqualifier needed a large amount of information to infer. Every time Zhou was injured, the disqualifier's understanding of Berserk Sword Immortal would increase, allowing him to infer more weaknesses. It wasn't that Zhou didn't know Berserk Sword Immortal's weakness, but Berserk Sword Immortal had cultivated a sword technique to the extreme, using an advantage to cover all his weaknesses. Even though Zhou knew that Berserk Sword Immortal had many weaknesses, he couldn't even protect himself under such an attack. He had no chance to make use of those weaknesses. Even if he's really a god and doesn't make mistakes, It's impossible for him to solve all problems with one advantage. Zhou Wen knew that as long as he continued enduring, he would definitely be able to analyze the disqualifier's weakness as long as he obtained enough information. Berserk Sword Immortal had always wanted to suppress Zhou Wen's faith and break his mind, but even though his injuries increased, Zhou Wen didn't show any signs of panic. From the looks of it, it's impossible to make his will submit just by injuring him. Then, I can only let him taste death. Seeing that Zhou Wen had no intention of submitting, Berserk Sword Immortal brandished the blood sword in his hand again, but it transformed into a sky full of sword beams that surrounded him from all directions. The terrifying sword beams instantly dyed the nearby void blood red. The distance that Zhou Wen could teleport was filled with sword beams. Apart from blocking them head-on, there seemed to be no other way. With a thought, Zhou Wen used teleportation again. However, this time, he teleported into W Star. W Star was extremely huge, far beyond what Earth could compare with. The last time Zhou Wen searched W Star, he could only use interstellar teleportation to head to different directions around W Star. After a rough search, he didn't even figure out where W Star's dimensional zone was. However, after seeing the video of the Tyrannosaurus clearing the trial, Zhou Wen knew that as long as he didn't open the door to the palace, there shouldn't be too much danger. Even if he encountered W Star's dimensional zone, it would be fine. At the instant he teleported into W Star, Zhou Wen felt the terrifying heat, radiation, and shock waves. All sorts of energy erupted. Even his body couldn't withstand it. Furthermore, he was still on the surface of W Star and hadn't gone too deep. The ancient Sovereign Sutra erupted without any reservation as he activated the Human Emperor sacrificial domain. Although this domain didn't have any healing effects on Zhou Wen, it could greatly enhance his physique, making him comparable to a human creature. Without any hesitation, Berserk Sword Immortal charged in with a sword beam that resembled a river of blood. The flames outside W Star were blasted away by the sword beam as the high-temperature liquid splattered everywhere. Zhou Wen realized that the ancient Sovereign Sutra was augmented to a certain extent in such a high-temperature environment. After the Human Emperor life soul in his body was augmented, its glow intensified and its vitality became stronger. Zhou Wen didn't summon the Human Emperor life soul, nor did he fuse with it. That way, anyone could easily tell that he was Human Emperor. Even if he didn't summon it, the augmentation of the ancient Sovereign Sutra had already strengthened Zhou Wen's vitality and physique. Instead, it was Berserk Sword Immortal who was clearly affected by W Star's high temperature. Although the effect wasn't too great, the time it took for the sword beam to tear through the high-temperature liquid gave Zhou Wen an opportunity. Zhou Wen turned around and continued charging into W Star. W Star's high temperature not only augmented his ancient Sovereign Sutra, but could also temper the golden flood dragon scissors, making them stronger. Berserk Sword Immortal relentlessly chased after him. His sword beams forcefully tore through the high-temperature liquid and constantly bombarded Zhou Wen. Zhou Wen brandished the resplendent golden flood dragon scissors, shattering the blood-colored sword beams that came charging at him. None of them could approach him. However, it didn't take long for the blood-colored sword beams to form an encirclement once again, trapping Zhou Wen in the sword beams that filled the sky. "Let's do it here." Zhou Wen suddenly stopped and said to Berserk Sword Immortal. Chapter 1521. Why? Have you thought it through? Berserk Sword Immortal stood in the sea of blood sword flashes as he looked at Zhou Wen, who was also surrounded by the sea of blood sword flashes. "Yes, I've thought it through." Zhou Wen nodded. "What have you thought through? Are you going to fight to the death and wait for your family and friends to go to hell with you? Or are you going to cooperate with me?" Berserk Sword Immortal asked. "That's not what I thought through, but how to kill you." Zhou Wen clenched the golden WIRM scissors in his hand as all his primordial energy frantically gathered into the golden WIRM scissors. "You have already said something similar. From the looks of it, the effects aren't good," Berserk Sword Immortal said indifferently. "Perhaps the effects will be better now." Zhou Wen didn't mind Berserk's Sword Immortal's mockery as he continued injecting his primordial energy into the golden WIRM scissors. There are some things that can't be casually tried. If you want to try, you have to be prepared to die. I won't give you another chance to live. Berserk's Sword Immortal already had the intention to kill. Zhou Wen's strength had already exceeded Berserk Sword Immortal's expectations. It made him feel that it was difficult to truly control him. Even if he managed to subdue him, he might become the next Jiang Yan. Therefore, if Zhou Wen still refused to submit, Berserk's Sword Immortal planned on killing him. Then, he would choose someone from Li Xian, Ming Xiao, and Feng Xiuyan to be the new spokesperson of the immortals in the human world. Death is nothing to humans. From the moment humans are born, they already know that they will die. As life is short, humans cherish their lives even more. However, they aren't afraid of death. But you are different. You have never thought that you will die, right? That's why you should be prepared to die, Zhou Wen said calmly. Humph. Berserk's Sword Immortal snorted coldly as he retracted his finger. Thousands of sword beams slashed at Zhou Wen. Berserk's Sword Immortal had already made up his mind. If this strike failed to kill Zhou Wen, he would return to Earth's Guide City and control Ming Xiao and company. To Berserk's Sword Immortal's surprise, Zhou Wen didn't choose to continue using spatial skills to escape. Zhou Wen ignored the bloody sword beams that surged over from all directions like a tidal wave. He raised the golden WIRM scissors in his hand and became one with it as he stabbed at Berserk's Sword Immortal. A golden rainbow tore through the tidal wave of blood-red sword light and instantly appeared in front of the Berserker's Sword Immortal. You are still too naive. That strange companion beast weapon can withstand my sword beam, but your body can't. Withdraw. Berserk's Sword Immortal's figure flashed as he retreated. At the same time, he shouted softly and retracted his fingers. Zhou Wen and the golden WIRM scissors, who were surrounded by the sanguine sword flashes, were instantly enveloped by the sword flashes. The sword beams that were as thin as neutrinos were omnipresent as they struck Zhou Wen and the golden flood dragon scissors. The golden flood dragon scissors were extremely tough, so the sword beams couldn't injure them. They could still tear through the sword beams in front of them. However, Zhou Wen didn't have such a strong physique. The infinite sword flashes tore through the minor heavenly cycle-killing array and immediately stabbed into his body. In an instant, Zhou Wen's armor and flesh were dyed blood-red by the sword flashes. That was the manifestation of the sword beam invading his body. Following that, his body would shatter into dust. Facing the endless sanguine sword flashes, Zhou Wen seemed to be at the end of his rope. Although Berserk's Sword Immortal didn't let down his guard, he couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. It was best not to leave a human like Zhou Wen alive. Zhou Wen's choice to fight him to the death was exactly what Berserk's Sword Immortal wanted. Although it's different from what I expected, it's best if this person dies. Berserk's Sword Immortal watched as countless sanguine sword flashes stabbed into Zhou Wen's body. Zhou Wen's death seemed to be a foregone conclusion, but for some reason, he still felt uneasy. Berserk's Sword Immortal was very confident in his sword flashes. Even a calamity-grade expert would definitely be doomed if so many sword flashes invaded their bodies, much less a terror-grade expert. However, he still felt uneasy. From Zhou Wen's previous actions, Berserk's Sword Immortal didn't believe that Zhou Wen would be so foolish as to let him kill him in such a manner. However, Berserk's Sword Immortal couldn't think of a way for Zhou Wen to turn the situation around. Just as Berserk's Sword Immortal was pondering, he suddenly realized that Zhou Wen's body had undergone a strange change. The armor on Zhou Wen's body had already exploded. His reddened body should have exploded along with the armor, but Zhou Wen's body didn't explode. Zhou Wen's body instantly turned into a dazzling white liquid. It was a liquid that was everywhere on Dubhe. When the liquid exploded, energy and sword flashes scattered everywhere like a blooming blood sun. As for Zhou Wen and the golden WIRM scissors, they appeared in the liquid area behind Berserk's Sword Immortal before teleporting behind him. The The golden WIRM scissors tore through the sword flashes and slashed at Berserk Sword Immortal's head again. Berserk Sword Immortal immediately reacted as he moved at high speed. Infinite sword flashes enveloped Zhou Wen again. However, this time, the sword flashes were still useless. When the sword flashes invaded Zhou Wen's body, his body would turn into a blob of liquid. Zhou Wen had used sky stealing in an extremely ingenious manner. As he charged over, he left a large number of spatial marks in the liquid on Dubhe. Every time a sword flash invaded his body, he would swap places with a blob of liquid. He would leave the sword flash that had entered his body in the liquid, while his true body would arrive at a safe spot. Zhou Wen constantly changed positions and constantly teleported. Like a ghost, he circled around Berserk Sword Immortal and attacked crazily. Berserk Sword Immortal was surprised to discover that Zhou Wen's attack technique was 90% similar to his Berserk Sword technique. You are dreaming if you want to use my sword technique to defeat me. Seeing that his sword flashes had lost their effect, Berserk Sword Immortal extended his hand and beckoned. The thousands of sword flashes condensed into a sword of blood again. Clang! However, when Berserk Sword Immortal brandished his sword at Zhou Wen again, the golden WIRM scissors blocked his sword of blood and sliced it. How is this possible? Berserk Sword Immortal's face was filled with horror. His Berserk Sword technique should have been one step ahead of Zhou Wen's golden WIRM scissors, but Zhou Wen had actually blocked his sword. This left Berserk Sword Immortal in disbelief. The broken sword of blood transformed into thousands of sword flashes that fused back together. Berserk Sword Immortal struck out again and again. Clang! 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 Every strike of Berserk Sword Immortal was blocked by Zhou Wen's golden WIRM scissors. Every time the sword of blood was sliced off, Zhou Wen advanced step by step as Berserk Sword Immortal retreated. Impossible! How is this possible? In such a short period of time, he has already seen through my Berserk Sword technique? That's absolutely impossible. Berserk Sword Immortal was extremely alarmed. It wasn't that there were no experts in the dimension who could fight him or even break through his Berserk Sword technique, but they were all existences at the same level or even higher than him. Furthermore, they often needed a long period of understanding before they could break through his Berserk Sword technique. A human, a Terragrade human, had actually managed to break through his Berserk Sword technique in a short battle. This was even more fantastical than a myth. Chapter 1522. No matter how much Berserk Sword Immortal refused to believe it, all his attacks were blocked by Zhou Wen. No matter how fast Berserk Sword Immortal's sword sped up, it was intercepted by Zhou Wen every time. It was like a speeding car coming to a halt again and again. The sword of blood was slashed into pieces, and although it would eventually return to Berserk Sword Immortal's hand, the situation had turned 180 degrees. Zhou Wen held the absolute initiative as he struck out again and again, forcing Berserk Sword Immortal to retreat. Berserk Sword Immortal had already changed his sword techniques in a bid to suppress Zhou Wen again, but no matter how he changed his sword techniques, he was unable to turn the tables. Zhou Wen seemed to see through everything. No matter how his sword techniques changed, Zhou Wen was able to strike at his most uncomfortable spots and attack his weaknesses. It made him feel so uncomfortable that he nearly vomited blood. Berserk Sword Immortal couldn't accept that his sword techniques would lose to a human. This was even more intolerable than Wang Mingyuan slapping him twice. After the previous battle, the disqualified had completely deduced all the weaknesses of Berserk Sword Immortal. Zhou Wen now knew his weaknesses better than Berserk Sword Immortal himself. I want you dead. Berserk Sword Immortal's strength erupted crazily, exceeding the limits of the ancient corpse's body. The ancient corpse's body constantly cracked as withered flesh and blood fell from its body. It looked like it was about to collapse. Berserk Sword Immortal seemed to have gone mad as he brandished the sword of blood and slashed at Zhou Wen. He no longer cared if he would be injured by the golden flood dragon scissors. He wanted to slice Zhou Wen's body apart before the golden flood dragon scissors sliced through his body. Both of them were vying for that instant. Neither of them was willing to shrink back at this moment. Clang! The golden flood dragon's scissors in Zhou Wen's hand suddenly opened up. The scissors blade that was stabbing at Berserk's sword immortal split into two. The upper scissors blade blocked the sword of blood that was slashing at Zhou Wen, instantly slicing it apart. The lower scissors blade continued stabbing at Berserk's sword immortal without stopping, piercing through his chest. The heavily injured Berserk sword immortal didn't reveal a look of panic. Instead, the corners of his mouth suffused a sinister smile. Heaven-devouring Berserk sword, immortal door seals life. You are underestimating me. Enjoy the last moments of your life. Sword beams that resembled chains spewed out from Berserk's sword immortal's wound, instantly wrapping around the golden WIRM scissors and Zhou Wen's body. Inside the ancient corpse of the Berserk sword immortal, the sword energy skyrocketed like a balloon that was about to explode. Moreover, it was still expanding. Zhou Wen struggled a few times, but he failed to escape. He felt as though his body had been locked by the sword beam chains. He couldn't even escape the restraints of spatial movement. A powerful companion beast like the golden WIRM scissors was locked tightly, unable to escape. Human, this is your fate. You chose the wrong enemy. The power of this body's self-destruction will doom you eternally. As for me, I will leave this body unscathed and return to the dimension. The next time I return, I will turn all your friends and family into slaves or send them down to accompany you. Berserk Sword Immortal's eyes were ferocious and smug, like a wolf that had captured its prey. However, before Berserk Sword Immortal could finish his sentence, he suddenly frowned slightly. He looked down and saw that Zhou Wen's other hand had stabbed a sword into his body at some point in time. It's useless. Your attack will only cause this body to explode even faster. No matter how injured this body is, it won't affect me. As Berserk Sword Immortal spoke, his expression suddenly turned nasty. He realized that his immortal body, which was attached to the ancient corpse, was suffering from injuries. And the source of the injuries was the sword in Zhou Wen's left hand. This is Immortal Culling Sword. You are human sovereign. Only then did Berserk Sword Immortal carefully size up the sword. After taking a closer look, he was immediately alarmed. Zhou Wen didn't answer. The immortal culling sword in his hand erupted with strength as it slashed up from the ancient corpse's abdomen, slicing open the ancient corpse's chest along with the sword beam chains. The immortal culling sword's restraining ability against immortals was just too strong. The life lock that could lock onto the golden WIRM scissors was easily sliced through by the immortal culling sword as though it was tofu. What was even more terrifying was that the immortal culling sword's injuries weren't just on the ancient corpse's body. Berserk Sword Immortal, who was attached to the ancient corpse, was also injured. Furthermore, the injuries were rapidly spreading. Even someone as powerful as Berserk Sword Immortal couldn't stop the immortal culling sword's injuries from spreading on his body. After Zhou Wen sliced through the life lock, he slashed at Berserk Sword Immortal again and again with the immortal culling sword. The instant the ancient corpse exploded, he teleported far away. Boom! The body of the ancient corpse exploded, triggering a large-scale energy explosion on the W star. The terrifying energy explosion and radiation seemed to burn the nearby space. A sword beam that resembled a red sunset rushed out from the exploding W star. The sword beam didn't go far before it was stopped by Zhou Wen, who had teleported. The red sunset was Berserk Sword Immortal, who had left the ancient corpse's body. At that moment, his body seemed to be bound by invisible chains. The chains were getting tighter, and the sword beam on the red sunset was getting weaker and weaker. Furthermore, there were sword scars on the human form formed by the red sunset. The sword scars kept extending, tearing apart and melting Berserk Sword Immortal's body. Berserk Sword Immortal released sword beams in an attempt to break through Zhou Wen's obstruction. However, his Heaven Realm power was suppressed by the laws of Earth's universe. He couldn't even reach Hell Realm power. Clang! The golden WIRM scissors flashed past, and one of Berserk Sword Immortal's arms was cut off. This made his already terrible situation even more difficult. If it wasn't for this damn place, you would have died 10,000 times. How could you injure me? Berserk Sword Immortal knew that it would be difficult for him to escape today, so he stopped running. He gathered his remaining strength to fight Zhou Wen to the death. Then why did you come? Zhou Wen said indifferently, but the immortal culling sword in his hand had already slashed out mercilessly. Berserk Sword Immortal was slightly taken aback. When he came, he hadn't expected such a situation. If he had known that Zhou Wen was so ferocious, he wouldn't have given him a chance. If he had known that Zhou Wen was the human sovereign and held the immortal culling sword in his hand, he wouldn't have used the immortal door lock to give Zhou Wen a chance to approach him. However, it was too late to say anything now. There weren't many ifs in this matter. At this point, Berserk Sword Immortal felt relieved. He looked at Zhou Wen and said, I really didn't expect Zhou Wen, the Thief King, and the human sovereign to be the same person. You did well. I didn't lose unjustly, but don't think that you have one just like that. If you want my life, you will also have to pay the price. After saying that, without waiting for Zhou Wen to react, Berserk Sword Immortal's red sunset body suddenly transformed into 10,000 sword beams. It was like a blooming blood-red flower that bloomed in space. Chapter 1523. Zhou Wen charged at Berserk Sword Immortal, hoping to kill him completely to prevent any future troubles. To his surprise, the 10,000 sword beams were just too fast. He didn't have time to teleport, so he could only brandish his sword to meet the sword beams. Thankfully, the sword beams shot out in all directions and not all at Zhou Wen. Zhou Wen brandished the immortal culling sword and the golden WIRM scissors, hoping to shatter the sword beams in front of him. However, to his surprise, the sword beams were like phantoms. Be it the immortal culling sword or the golden WIRM scissors, they failed to touch the sword beams. The sword beams even passed through Zhou Wen's body, forming a blooming blood-red chrysanthemum before instantly vanishing. Zhou Wen immediately checked his body and didn't discover any remnants of a brand. He secretly heaved a sigh of relief, but at the same time, he was puzzled. What was the use of Berserk Sword Immortal's final sacrifice? However, when Zhou Wen observed his surroundings, he couldn't help but be taken aback. This wasn't dub heat at all. There was no longer any heat. As far as his eyes could see, there was a beautiful sea of flowers and land that stretched as far as the eye could see. What is this place? Zhou Wen frowned as he looked around. He felt that this was Earth. The composition of the air was very similar to Earth's. However, after attempting the Singularity Universe, he realized that there was no way to locate him here, nor could he teleport out. Berserk Sword Immortal sacrificed himself to teleport me here. This definitely isn't a good place. Zhou Wen used Truth Listener to scan his surroundings, but apart from the sea of flowers, there was nothing else. What was even stranger was that there were only flowers here. There were no animals, no bees, no butterflies, not even a bug, much less an animal. The flowers looked very ordinary, as though there was nothing special about them. They weren't dimensional plants. What is this place? Zhou Wen couldn't figure it out. All he could do was converge his aura, put on the invisibility cloak, and fly in a certain direction, hoping to discover some useful information. As he didn't know where he was, Zhou Wen didn't dare fly too fast. He slowly flew forward. After flying for about 50 kilometers, there was still an endless sea of flowers in front of him. However, a creature finally appeared in the sea of flowers. That's a devil? Zhou Wen's heart sank as he looked at the creature sitting cross-legged in the sea of flowers. The creature had red skin, horns on its head, a pair of bat-like wings on its back, and a face like that of a cow. It looked ugly and strange, very similar to the demons in the legends of the West District. Zhou Wen wasn't afraid of devils, but he now thought of a serious problem. If it's really a devil and this is an Earth, is it possible that it's a dimension? Don't tell me that fellow teleported me to the devils of the dimension. Zhou Wen thought for a moment, and felt that something was amiss. He had been to the dimension once. The spatial laws there were completely different from Earth's universe. It was very difficult for mythical creatures to move there. Now that Zhou was at the Terror grade, he could even match a Calamity grade. It was definitely no problem for him to move, but it wasn't to the point of not feeling anything. The environment here didn't look like a dimension. It was very similar to Earth. As Zhou pondered, the demonic creature sitting in the sea of flowers opened its eyes. Its black eyes immediately lit up as it stood up from the sea of flowers. It was more than 4 meters tall. For humans, it was already considered a giant creature. Zhou was alarmed. The devil-like creature flapped its wings, causing the surrounding flowers to fly everywhere. The devil's figure also vanished from Zhou's vision. Clang! The demonic creature appeared above Zhou and slashed at his head with a claw. Zhou used the golden flood dragon scissors to block its claw. Its speed was so fast that Zhou didn't even have the time to open the golden flood dragon scissors. All he did was use the scissors to block the claw. Zhou felt a huge force coming from the golden flood dragon scissors. He couldn't hold it as the devil snatched it away. Zhou was alarmed as he hurriedly ordered the golden flood dragon scissors to fly back. The golden flood dragon scissors trembled incessantly in the devil's claw, but it failed to escape its grasp and fly back. Zhou was truly alarmed. The golden flood dragon scissors was a hell-grade companion beast, but it was immobilized. How powerful was that? Berserk Sword Immortal has indeed teleported me to a terrifying place. Zhou gritted his teeth and turned to teleport away. He didn't even want the golden flood dragon scissors. It wasn't that Zhou didn't want it, but that the devil could even control the golden flood dragon scissors. Zhou wasn't on the same level as it. Snatching the golden flood dragon scissors would probably result in death. Just as Zhou teleported out, he saw a red light flash in front of him. The devil had already arrived in front of him. With one claw holding onto the golden flood dragon scissors, the other claw swiped at Zhou's head. The fingernails that resembled swords would probably pierce through Zhou's head and body if he were to be grabbed by it. Zhou summoned the dragon in prison armor and put it on. He pulled out the immortal culling sword and stabbed at the devil's claw. Chi! The immortal culling sword pierced through the devil's claw. Although the devil didn't cry out in pain, it subconsciously retracted its claw. Zhou took the opportunity to teleport elsewhere. However, just like last time, just as Zhou teleported out, he saw a red shadow flash. The devil had chased after him again. Furthermore, its injured claw had already healed as it swiped at Zhou's head again. Zhou now understood why Berserk Sword Immortal hadn't sent him to the dimensions of mortals, but to such a godforsaken place. The immortal culling sword had a strong restraining effect on immortals. If an immortal was injured by the immortal culling sword, it would be very difficult for the wound to heal. It might even constantly expand. However, against that devil, the immortal culling sword's effects weren't that obvious. At the very least, it didn't have any restraining effect. Zhou was extremely depressed. This devil wasn't stronger than Berserk Sword Immortal, who was suppressed by Earth's laws. However, Zhou's strongest weapon, the golden flood dragon scissors, had been snatched away by it from the beginning. In the battle with Berserk Sword Immortal, the soul reflection mirror had been severely damaged. It was still in the midst of self-repair and temporarily couldn't be used. Using the immortal culling sword to fight, it didn't give him an advantage. Zhou had no choice but to summon the golden sniper and get him to fire from afar to cooperate with him in the battle against the devil. Zhou thought that as long as the golden sniper fired his 7th bullet, he would be able to restrain the devil to a certain extent. He might even be able to severely injure it. To his surprise, just as the golden sniper fired his 2nd bullet, the devil strangely appeared behind him. With a slap, he sent the golden sniper hiding in the flowers, flying along with his sniper rifle. If Zhou hadn't reacted quickly enough to retract the golden sniper and allow the devil to slap him, the golden sniper would probably have died. Chapter 1524. All Zhou could do was constantly move his body and use teleportation to dodge the devil's attacks. The devil grabbed the golden WIRM scissors with one hand, preventing it from escaping. However, its combat strength was still terrifying. It was undoubtedly a hell-level creature. The sea of flowers was endless. As Zhou was teleporting, he suddenly realized that another devil had appeared in front of him. The devil in front of him looked almost identical to the red devil that was chasing Zhou. It was also sitting cross-legged in the sea of flowers. The only difference was that this devil's skin was blue. The blue devil sensed the commotion and opened its eyes to look in Zhou's direction. Suddenly, it flapped its wings and flew into the air. It transformed into a blue shadow that appeared in front of Zhou and grabbed at his head. Zhou already had a plan in mind. At the instant the blue devil's claws were about to touch his head, his figure vanished, and he teleported in another direction. Seeing that the blue devil was about to collide with the red devil behind him, Zhou was still hoping that they would fight. However, to his surprise, the red and blue devils stopped their attacks and charged at Zhou together. Holy **T, isn't it said that devils are territorial? Why aren't these two devils fighting each other? Zhou was depressed, but all he could do was continue fleeing. Fighting one devil was already very taxing. Now that he was being pursued by two devils, Zhou's situation became even more difficult. All he could do was summon the Chaos Egg. As he used the Chaos Egg to block the devil's attacks, he used teleportation to escape. What kind of crappy place is this? Apart from the sea of flowers, can't there be anything else? Zhou didn't know how far he had run. He estimated that it was more than 10,000 kilometers. Apart from the sea of flowers, he didn't see anything. Zhou originally hoped to leave the sea of flowers and find a place like a mountain range to hide him. Perhaps he could find a place to hide, but to his surprise, this godforsaken place was an endless plain. There wasn't even a single rise or fall, much less a mountain range. This is definitely not the demon world. Why are there so many flowers in the demon world? It should be a scene from hell. Just as Zhou was feeling depressed, he was alarmed to discover that another devil had appeared in front of him. This time, the devil that appeared had purple skin. Its appearance was similar to the other two devils as it charged over. Zhou lamented inwardly. Did Berserk Sword Immortal send me to the seven-colored devil's nest? If he gathered all 7 demons, could he summon the dragon god to fulfill his wish? If I can fulfill my wish, I have to get the divine dragon to change my luck. Even if I can't be as lucky as Wang Lu, I can at least have a stable life. Bang, 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 bang. Zhou was besieged by the 3 devils as the Chaos Egg flew around like a baseball. The solid essence energy crystals in it rapidly increased, and in a short period of time, the Chaos Egg was almost filled. Thankfully, Zhou was already prepared. He transferred the solid essence energy crystals condensed in the Chaos Egg to the glutton, tyrant behemoth. Thankfully, the strength and speed of the 3 devils were terrifying, but they weren't at the level of directly destroying the Chaos Egg. Zhou could barely preserve his life. Zhou didn't dare run anymore. After running for so long, he hadn't found an opportunity to escape. Instead, he had 2 more devils. Who knew if there would be a few more devils if he continued running? I don't have many cards I can use. Only the Immortal Culling Sword and Golden Sniper are of some use now. However, it's too difficult to counterattack under the siege of 3 devils. Zhou thought about it, but couldn't think of a way to resolve his current predicament. If Truth Listener can come out, there might still be hope. Zhou tried summoning Truth Listener again. Although he could sense his connection with Truth Listener didn't seem to be able to remove its earring mode. As for Tyrant Behemoth, after devouring a large number of essence energy crystals, it actually showed signs of breaking through. Such a glutton is the best. As long as there's food, there's a chance of evolution. Zhou was very envious, but even if Tyrant Behemoth advanced to the Calamity grade, it would only be at the mortal stage. Under such circumstances, it wasn't of much use. Furthermore, Tyrant Behemoth only showed signs of evolution. It was unknown how long it would take for it to truly evolve. After some thought, Zhou thought of demonic neonate, but he was somewhat hesitant. In fact, when he saw the devils, Zhou had already thought of demonic neonate. Demonic neonate seemed to have an inextricable connection with the creatures of the demon world, but demonic neonate looked like she was related to the East District demon world. Grim Demon was also a guardian of the East District demon world. As for devils, they were devils from the West District. He didn't know if demonic neonate would be useful. After all, demonic neonate was only at the mythical stage. If they didn't recognize her, demonic neonate probably wouldn't even be able to withstand a single slap. However, Zhou now had the Chaos Egg protecting him. Demonic neonate was petite and could be summoned inside the Chaos Egg. He could summon her first and let her take a look at the situation. Since he had no other choice, Zhou summoned demonic neonate. Demonic neonate appeared in Zhou Wen's arms with a demonic sword in her arms. Her black and white eyes seemed to be able to penetrate the Chaos Egg as she stared at the devils attacking the Chaos Egg. The purple devil's claws stabbed into the Chaos Egg, severely deforming it before it flew out at light speed. In midair, the red devil had already caught up. He kicked the Chaos Egg and sent it flying like a baseball. The spatial compression in the Chaos Egg squeezed demonic neonate's tiny face onto Zhou Wen's chest, causing it to deform. The condensed essence energy crystal landed on demonic neonate, nearly burying her. Zhou Wen was just about to teleport the essence energy crystal to Tyrant Behemoth and get demonic neonate to take a good look to see if it was possible to appease the three devils. To his surprise, demonic neonate's figure flashed as she charged out of the Chaos Egg. As though she had teleported, she appeared outside the Chaos Egg. Why did she go out? Zhou Wen was alarmed because the blue devil was charging towards demonic neonate. Its dagger-like nails were about to stab into demonic neonate's face. Zhou Wen wore a look of horror as he wanted to pull demonic neonate back, but it was already too late. To his surprise, the red devil also wore a look of horror. Its high-speed body came to a sudden halt and stopped in front of demonic neonate before its nails touched her. Its nails were less than a centimeter away from demonic neonate's face. Zhou Wen could even see sweat dripping from the red devil's forehead. After the scene froze for a second, the red devil seemed to snap to his senses. He suddenly retracted his claws and took 2 steps back. Then, with a thud, he knelt in front of demonic neonate and prostrated himself. It wasn't just the red devil. The blue and purple devils on the other 2 sides also prostrated themselves. Chapter 1525. Zhou Wen was pleasantly surprised. He never expected demonic neonate to be so useful. These 3 devils were likely hell-grade existences, but they were so afraid of the mythical demonic neonate. It was truly surprising. The red devil released his claws, and the golden flood dragon scissors returned to Zhou Wen's hand. With the golden flood dragon scissors in hand, Zhou Wen regained some of his confidence. He stood behind demonic neonate and sized up the 3 devils that were prostrating on the ground, trembling like quails. From the looks of it, it was hard to imagine that they were hell-grade existences. Demonic neonate reached out to hold the hilt of the demonic sword and didn't pull it out. Together with the scabbard, she smashed it ruthlessly at the red devil's head. The red devil didn't dare move. He allowed demonic neonate to hit him a few times, but he still lay there, not daring to resist. After a few hits, demonic neonate seemed to calm down. Only then did she retract the demonic sword and hold it in her arms again. She floated in the air and sized up her surroundings. Over there, demonic neonate landed on Zhou Wen's shoulder and pointed in a direction. Clearly, she was getting Zhou Wen ahead in that direction. "What's over there?" Zhou Wen asked curiously as he walked. "I don't know," demonic neonate said with a shake of her head. Zhou Wen had an odd expression, but at that moment, he could only listen to demonic neonate and fly over. The 3 devils didn't dare get up. Like monkeys on all 4s, they crawled behind Zhou Wen. They didn't dare get too close, nor did they dare get too far. They looked nervous and awkward. "Little neonate, do you know where this is?" Zhou Wen asked demonic neonate again. Demonic Neonate shook her head again and didn't even say a word. That's right. Demonic Neonate was originally a muddle-headed infant. After being killed by me, she was absorbed by the Dead Man Tree and reborn as a companion beast. She has long lost her previous memories. Even if she knew where this place was in the past, she probably doesn't know now. Zhouwen's heart stirred as he said to Demonic Neonate, "Little Neonate, release Grim Demon. I have something to ask him." When Demonic Neonate heard Zhouwen, the demonic sword in her arms automatically unsheathed. A demonic aura surged out and quickly transformed into Grim Demon. "Boo-hoo, I'm finally out. The air outside is so sweet." After Grim Demon came out, he greedily took a breath and was so excited that he was about to cry. When Grim Demon saw the 3 demons behind him, he was immediately given a fright. He flew backward and was about to escape into the demonic sword. Bang! Demonic Neonate struck his head with her sword, causing Grim Demon to fall to the ground. Grim Demon crawled up from the ground as though his mind had finally cleared up. He stood up and shouted at the 3 devils in an awe-inspiring manner. "3 mere devils, how dare you be so impudent in front of me? Why aren't you kneeling down and apologizing to me?" The 3 demons completely ignored him as they looked at the demonic infant's expression from afar. "Cut the crap. Grim Demon, do you know where this is?" Zhouwen said with a frown. "Where else could it be? Of course, it's the demon clan's territory. Why are you here? Why did you come to the dimension for no reason? Do you have a death wish? Isn't it good to live well? Fortunately, this is the fiend race's territory. With my lord here, you'll be able to keep your life. If you went anywhere else, who knows how many times you'd have been cut down. It doesn't matter if you die, but don't implicate my lord." Grim Demon shouted unhappily. Zhouwen thought to himself, "Do you think I want to come to this crappy place? Wasn't I forcefully sent in? You say that this is a dimension? Then why don't I feel the suppression of the dimension's laws?" The last time Zhouwen came to the dimension, he could barely see anything. Everything around him seemed to be distorted and abstract. Furthermore, there was immense pressure, but there was none here. "It's different here." Grim Demon looked at the sea of flowers around him and said with a strange expression, "If I'm not wrong, this should be the land of the fallen." Land of the fallen? Zhouwen had never heard of such a place. "Haven't you heard of the myth of the West District's fallen angel?" Grim Demon frowned. "Are you talking about Satan or Lucifer?" Zhouwen knew that there were actually several versions of fallen angels. He was more familiar with the versions of Satan and Lucifer. Some people also said that Satan was Lucifer. The lord of myriad fiends, Satan originally lived in heaven, but because he lost the war with God, he was chased to hell. Legend had it that Lucifer was an angel, and he was the angel closest to God. Later, God created the ancestor of humans, Adam, and named him the Messiah. He requested angels to kneel to Adam. Michael and the other angels followed God's will and knelt before Adam. Only Lucifer didn't kneel. Lucifer believed that angels had already lost their freedom by serving God. If they knelt before humans, they would even lose their dignity and pride. Therefore, he refused to kneel before Adam. The angels behind Lucifer also refused to kneel before Adam. They severed their faith and fear and mustered their courage to fight God. Although they were ultimately defeated and sent to hell, Lucifer was synonymous with pride and dignity. At the same time, he was the king of hell. "I'd rather be a king in hell than a slave in heaven." This was Lucifer's famous saying. Of course, there were also people who said that Satan and Lucifer were the same person. There were all sorts of different versions of the legend. Zhouwen didn't understand them in detail. That was all he knew. In fact, I've never been to the land of the fallen in the dimension, so I don't know if Satan and Lucifer are the same person. However, in the mythical era of Earth, fallen angels and devils once participated in the battle. One of the fallen angels was extremely terrifying. Under the suppression of Earth's laws, he still killed countless deities. As he was stained with too much divine blood, his pure white feathers were tainted black by layers of blood. He was one of the few existences that could barely match me. After a pause, Grim Demon continued. I heard from them that they came from the land of the fallen. It's a land of imprisonment that's immortal and indestructible. It has endless flowers that never wither, representing eternal life. But it also represents endless pain and torture. Since the land of the fallen is the territory of fallen angels, it shouldn't be the same place as you, right? Why are these devils afraid of neonate? Joan asked as he stared at Grim Demon. Grim Demon clearly knew something about demonic neonate. Grim Demon looked at Joe disdainfully and said, "Don't use your narrow and ignorant eyes to measure my lord, let alone a mere devil." Even as though realizing that he had said too much, Grim Demon changed the topic and said, "However, with Her Excellency's current state, it's best not to let those fearful fellows see her. It'll be troublesome if they recognize her. Why did you come here for no reason? Are you courting death?" Chapter 1526. Joan asked Grim Demon a few more questions, but Grim Demon wasn't willing to say anything about demonic neonate. No matter how Joan threatened him, it was useless. Demonic neonate didn't seem to care about her origins. She sat on Joan's shoulder as though she was listening to something that had nothing to do with her. Joan proceeded in the direction demonic neonate pointed. As for what was there, even Grim Demon didn't know. This was Grim Demon's first time coming to the land of the fallen. In the past, he had only heard of it. He had no idea what was here, nor could he sense what demonic neonate was pointing at. After Joan walked for a while, he realized that there was another devil in front of him. This time, it was a golden devil. When the golden devil saw demonic neonate, its reaction was the same as the previous three devils. It immediately prostrated itself, as though it had seen its god. Demonic neonate ignored it and pointed in another direction. Joan had no choice but to continue walking. There was a devil in every spot demonic neonate pointed at. Red, blue, purple, gold, green, white, and black. There were 7 devils gathered. Could it be that this thing can really summon a divine dragon? No, even if it can, it should be summoning the devil king, Satan. Joan thought to himself, but he didn't stop. He continued advancing in the direction demonic neonate pointed. As the sea of flowers was boundless, Joan didn't know where to go if he didn't follow demonic neonate's directions. Furthermore, without demonic neonate suppressing the devils, it was almost impossible for Joan to fight 7 alone. Joan originally imagined that more devils would appear, but after walking for a long time, he didn't encounter any more devils. Even Grim Demon felt somewhat impatient. This place was very beautiful, but no matter how beautiful it was, once one looked at it for a long time, it would slowly make one feel horrified. This sea of flowers was just like that. It was beautiful at first glance, but the longer one stayed, the more sinister and terrifying he found it. Now, Joan wouldn't find it inappropriate if this was hell. After walking for an unknown period of time, a different scene finally appeared in front of him. In the sea of flowers in front of him, a strange building appeared. The building looked like a foundation, like the lowest part of an incomplete pyramid. However, pyramids weren't of the same system as angels and devils. It probably wouldn't appear here. "It's there," demonic neonate said as she pointed at the strange building. "What's there?" Joan hurriedly asked. "I don't know." The demonic infant shook her head again. Joan had no choice but to fly up, hoping to see what was inside the building from afar. He flew into the air and carefully observed the building. He found that although the building looked like the bottom of a pyramid, there were still some differences. The building looked like it was made of stones, but upon closer inspection, the stones were a little special. They didn't seem to be real stones, but more like some kind of cement. Many of the stones were mixed with gravel and shells. There were a lot of broken walls on it. It was unknown whether it was unfinished or destroyed after it was completed. However, it was certain that the current appearance of the building was not the original appearance of the building. There should be at least 1 or more floors above it. It was unknown why only the bottom floor was left. Joan was still observing the strange building when demonic neonate jumped down and walked towards the door on the side of the building. The style of the building was very strange. It was impossible to tell where it was from. Seeing demonic neonate walk towards the door, the 7 demons quickly circled to the door and prostrated themselves in front of it. They kowtowed to demonic neonate, as though they were begging her not to enter. Demonic neonate ignored them as Grim Demon rushed forward and kicked the demons in front of demonic neonate to the side. With demonic neonate around, the demons didn't dare resist. All they did was kneel by the side and kowtow repeatedly. They let out pleading whispers as though they were pleading. "Get lost. What are you shouting for?" Grim Demon led the way and protected demonic neonate as she walked forward. Joan watched from behind with an odd expression. No matter how he looked at the scene, it felt like a landlord was bullying the poor with his servants. However, when he thought of how these bullied fellows were terrifying existences at the hell stage, Joan found it odd. Grim Demon pushed open the dusty door and the air entered the building. Dust flew inside. It was unknown how long it had been since anyone had come. Joan followed demonic neonate into the building and immediately realized that there were no statues or murals related to the ghost religion in the huge building. There were at most some simple symbols and words in the building. In the middle was a platform with many flowers placed on it. From the looks of the flowers, they were likely plucked from outside and placed on the platform. It was unknown how long they had been placed, but the blood was still fresh and beautiful. There were no signs of them withering. And on top of those flowers, there was a girl with long silver hair lying flat. The girl looked no different from a human. She wore a white nightgown as though she was asleep. However, Joan didn't hear her breathing, nor did he sense any vitality from her. However, when Joan saw the girl's face clearly, he gaped and didn't say a word. The eldest girl looked very similar to Tian Tian. However, Tian Tian had blonde hair while she had silver hair. The other parts of her body were very similar. Even her height and thinness were very similar. If Tian Tian is really God, then this silver-haired girl, could she be the legendary Satan? Joan found it increasingly odd. Demonic neonate wasn't in the mood to size up the girl like Joan. She walked straight up the platform. The 7 devils also crawled in and knelt in front of the stone platform. They constantly kowtowed at demonic neonate as they whimpered. It was obvious that they were pleading. However, demonic neonate ignored them and walked up the stone platform. She stepped on the petals and reached out to touch the girl. Bam! Demonic neonate's body suddenly seemed to be ejected by a force. Like a cannonball, she slammed into the distant wall. Joan teleported and reached out to press his hand on demonic neonate's back. Immediately, he felt a massive force transmit over. Joan used the sky-stealing, sun-swapping technique to forcefully channel demonic neonate's strength into his body before pressing his hand against the wall. Boom! The rock shattered where Joan's palm pressed, and cracks spread out in all directions. Demonic neonate seemed to be extremely indignant as she flew to the front of the platform and stared intently at the girl's body. Joan followed and traced demonic neonate's gaze. He saw that she was looking at the girl's finger. On her finger was a ring with a gem embedded in it. The gem was crystalline and shimmered with a charming glow like a star. The glow was clear but not cold. Chapter 1527. Demonic neonate wanted to reach out to take off the ring on the girl's finger, but after some hesitation, she didn't reach out. She turned to look at Joan, her large eyes clearly pleading. Grim Demon, do you know this girl's origins? Joan asked Grim Demon. I've never seen her before, at least not in the mythical era. Grim Demon looked carefully for a while and said after some thought, however, to be protected by these 7 extraordinary devils, she must have a great background. It's best not to touch her if possible. Joan also felt that it was best not to touch her. She resembled Tian Tian too much. If she was really as powerful as Tian Tian, it was impossible to take anything from her. However, the girl looked lifeless. The huge commotion didn't wake her up, so she might be dead. It was worth a try. He looked down at demonic neonate and saw her eyes filled with anticipation. Joan decided to give it a try. Joan knew very well that although his level was higher than demonic neonates, it probably wasn't safe for him to obtain something that even demonic neonate couldn't obtain. He summoned the dragon imprisoned armor and wore it. Zhou gathered all his strength to defend himself before reaching out to take off the ring on the girl's finger. The 7 devils bared their teeth below, looking like they wanted to skin Zhou alive. Demonic neonate glared at them, and they immediately shrank back, glaring fiercely at Zhou. Bam! Just as Zhou's finger touched the ring, he felt a powerful force eject him out. His body slammed into the wall like a bullet. Thankfully, Zhou summoned the Chaos Egg in time. The Chaos Egg bounced back and forth between the walls for a while before slowly stopping. Why is this force much stronger than when demonic neonate took it? Zhou spat out a mouthful of blood. Although demonic neonate had been ejected by the force when she took it, the force was clearly much weaker than when Zhou took it. Otherwise, demonic neonate's body probably wouldn't have been able to withstand the instant force. Zhou returned to the platform and looked at the silver-haired girl who was dead or alive. He frowned and thought. His recovery ability wasn't bad. His injuries were slowly recovering, but even if he recovered, it was probably impossible to remove the ring using the original method. Demonic neonate was still staring at the ring. Clearly, she cared a lot about it. Zhou stared at the ring for a while. The ring was made of metal, but he didn't know what it was. The gem wasn't a diamond. It was crystalline with a hint of blue. It was clearly transparent, but no matter which angle one looked at it from, it was impossible to see the inside of the gem. Do you want a ring or a gem? Zhou asked demonic neonate. Gem, demonic neonate hurriedly said. That's easy. Zhou summoned the golden flood dragon scissors and used cleave to cut the ring's metal ring. Dang! With a metallic clang, the golden WIRM scissors, which could cut hell-level creatures and weapons in half, couldn't even leave a mark on the metal ring. Instead, it was the golden WIRM scissors that flew out and brushed past Zhou's cheek. If Zhou hadn't dodged quickly, half his head would have been sliced off. The golden WIRM scissors stabbed into the wall, leaving only the handle outside. The golden WIRM scissors trembled for a while before flying out. Zhou was somewhat disappointed. The golden WIRM scissors had such powerful destructive power, yet it failed to damage the ring. It was probably very difficult to take it off. Demonic neonate wanted the ring so much, so it was probably something she needed very much. It was very likely to help her evolve, so Zhou didn't want to give up. It was just too difficult for demonic neonate to evolve. She didn't eat crystals at all, and ordinary things couldn't help her evolve. It wasn't easy for her to find something she needed, so she had to give it a try no matter what. Zhou thought for a moment before summoning the immortal culling sword and slashing at the ring with all his might. Clang! Zhou's immortal culling sword flew out, but the ring didn't leave any marks. What's this ring? Is this girl really Satan? Zhou increasingly felt that the possibility of the girl being Satan was very high. In many legends, Satan was a monster like a snake or a red dragon, but the girl in front of him was abnormally beautiful. If she was Satan, Zhou was more willing to believe that Satan and Lucifer were the same person. Tian Tian is God, so Lucifer, the fallen angel, is this girl. It seems to make sense. After all, angels were created by God. Perhaps Lucifer was created according to God's own appearance. Zhou thought for a moment and decided to give another try. Since it was impossible to forcefully sever the ring, Zhou could only think of a way to remove the ring from the girl's finger. Thankfully, Zhou cultivated in many essence energy arts. He circulated the different essence energy arts, hoping that there was a power that could make the ring or the girl's power not repel him. Perhaps he could successfully remove the ring. Bam! The first order of chaos failed as Zhou was sent flying. Bam! The Tao art failed as well. Bam! Chi refinement art, demon god bloodline catalog, god fiend era, and other essence energy arts failed one after another. As long as they touched the ring, Zhou would immediately be ejected. Zhou wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and walked to the girl's side again. This time, he circulated the ancient Sovereign Sutra. This was his last essence energy art. If he couldn't even use the ancient Sovereign Sutra, he would probably have no choice but to give up. The light of human sovereign bloomed from Zhou Wen's body, making him seem as though he had turned into a shadow of light. He extended his glowing palm and touched the ring with his fingers again. Bam! Zhou Wen was sent flying faster than ever before. He was as fast as light, and before he could even summon the Chaos Egg, he slammed into the wall. With a loud boom, even the extremely sturdy wall that was several meters thick collapsed from Zhou Wen's impact. The dragon-imprisoned armor on Zhou Wen's body cracked from the impact. A large portion of it shattered on his back. Puffed. Blood spewed out of Zhou Wen's mouth as he struggled a few times, but he failed to stand up. He felt as though his entire body had fallen apart. It was unknown how many bones had shattered. Demonic Neonate came to Zhou Wen's side and sized up his injuries. Her eyes were filled with anxiety as she shook her head at Zhou Wen, as though she wanted to tell him not to try anymore. She didn't want the gem. Zhou Wen summoned a mythical pill essence and swallowed it after transforming it into a pill. His injuries rapidly healed, and soon he was almost healed. Zhou Wen stood up and wanted to walk towards the girl, but Demonic Neonate tugged at the corner of his clothes. No! Demonic Neonate looked at Zhou Wen and shook her head repeatedly, her eyes filled with determination. I've already tried so many times. One more time doesn't matter. Zhou Wen wanted to try again. He didn't use any other powers and only used the Lost Immortal Sutra. Chapter 1528. The Lost Immortal Sutra was very pure and didn't have any special attributes. It didn't augment his body much, but it was very powerful in terms of primordial energy usage. However, this strength wasn't meant for combat. Therefore, Zhou Wen rarely used the Lost Immortal Sutra in combat. He would basically add a simulated primordial energy art to it. I hope it'll be of some use. Zhou Wen was trying everything he could. At this stage, he couldn't accept it if he didn't try all the possibilities. In fact, the Lost Immortal Sutra didn't need Zhou Wen to circulate it himself. It constantly circulated in Zhou Wen's body. It removed the various powers that were added to it and restored the Lost Immortal Sutra to its original state. Even His Excellency can't take it down. It's useless even if you try. It's best you leave quickly. I have a nagging feeling that something's amiss here. Grim Demon didn't wish to stay in such a dangerous place any longer as he urged Zhou Wen to leave quickly. Zhou Wen ignored him. After returning the Lost Immortal Sutra to its origins, he put away the dragon-imprisoned armor and extended a hand to touch the girl's hand. In fact, Zhou Wen also knew that the chances of success weren't high. Even Sky Stealing couldn't take the ring off. The chances of a primordial energy art like the Lost Immortal Sutra being effective without any special powers augmentation were slim. Zhou Wen wanted to give it a try and see if the Lost Immortal Sutra's imitation ability could work. Perhaps it could simulate the girl's aura. Of course, this was also a delusion. The demon god bloodline catalog couldn't scan the girl's body and transform into her. The Lost Immortal Sutra was in primordial energy art that purely simulated auras. She didn't have any aura, so it was probably impossible. Various thoughts flashed through his mind as Zhou Wen's finger touched the ring on the girl's finger. Zhou Wen was already prepared to be sent flying, but nothing happened when his fingertip touched the ring. I'm fine. Zhou Wen was overjoyed. Although the Lost Immortal Sutra couldn't simulate the girl's aura, making her seem like a dead person without any aura, there was no way to simulate it. However, this ordinary Lost Immortal Sutra allowed Zhou Wen to finally touch the ring. Girl, it's useless to leave the ring with you anyway. Lend it to me. If you need anything in the future, tell me in a dream. If you want clothes, a house, or money, I'll burn them for you. As Zhou Wen spoke, he carefully lifted the girl's finger and slowly removed the ring with his other hand. Roar! Seeing the ring slide on the girl's slender finger, the 7 demons were immediately enraged. Various colors of light spewed out from their bodies, transforming into demonic phantoms that enveloped their bodies. All of them roared ferociously, wanting to charge forward and eat Zhou Wen. Scram! Demonic Neonate lightly shouted, and the 7 enraged abyss devils immediately extinguished their flames. Although they didn't immediately retreat, they didn't dare to charge forward again. They stood there with conflicted expressions. Taking advantage of this time, Zhou removed the ring from the girl's finger without any accidents. "Thank you." Zhou placed the ring in his palm, pressed his palms together, and bowed to the girl before throwing the ring to Demonic Neonate. "How did you get it? Could it be that you were deliberately acting the previous few times to gain my lord's favor?" Grim Demon looked at Zhou suspiciously. Just now, Zhou had unleashed all sorts of powers, but he had failed to take off the ring. Now, he had taken it off without doing anything. This made Grim Demon suspect that his previous actions were all an act. Zhou couldn't be bothered with him. When the 7 abyss devils saw that the ring had fallen into Demonic Neonate's hands, they were discouraged and didn't have any thoughts of charging forward. Demonic Neonate caught the ring and left the girl's palm. The ring itself didn't repel Demonic Neonate. When Demonic Neonate's finger touched the gem on the gem landed on Demonic Neonate's fingertip like a water droplet. It swayed slightly on her fingertip like a water droplet on a lotus leaf or a transparent jelly. Demonic Neonate casually threw the ring on the ground before placing the jelly-like gem into her mouth. What a prodigal! When Zhou saw Demonic Neonate throw the ring on the ground, he hurriedly went over to pick it up. Since the golden WYRM scissors and immortal culling sword failed to injure the ring, it was definitely extraordinary. Zhou held the ring and wiped the dust off it with his hand. He planned on storing it in the chaos space. Perhaps it would be of some use in the future. Before putting it in, Zhou tried squeezing it hard, but to his surprise, the metal ring broke with a crack. Zhou was dumbfounded when he saw the broken ring fall to the ground. "What's this? It was so hard just now. Why did it suddenly become so weak?" Zhou couldn't accept this outcome. He picked up the fragments and squeezed them again, only to be crushed to smithereens. "Isn't this just ordinary metal?" Zhou was at a loss whether to laugh or cry. After all this time, this thing was just ordinary metal. The only thing that was really good was the gem. The reason why the ring was so hard was either because of the gem or because of the girl's strangeness. After Demonic Neonate ate the gem, she seemed to be drunk. Her body swayed and she fell to the ground. Zhou hurriedly flashed to Demonic Neonate's side and picked her up. "Neonate, are you all right?" Zhou patted Demonic Neonate's cheek, hoping to wake her up. "I'm going to sleep." Demonic Neonate couldn't even open her eyes, as she said in a daze. She flipped over and huddled in Zhou's arms. She grabbed Zhou's clothes and quickly fell asleep. Zhou called out a few more times, but Demonic Neonate didn't respond at all. She fell asleep just like that. What's going on? Is she going to evolve? Zhou looked at Demonic Neonate in his arms and was momentarily unsure of what was happening. Typical companion beast bodies would rapidly mutate when they evolved. Even those with slower body mutations would form an energy envelope and slowly evolve in a certain energy environment. However, Demonic Neonate only looked like she was drunk and asleep. There weren't any intense energy fluctuations from her body, nor did her body undergo any anomalies. What was even stranger was that Zhou wanted to unsummon Demonic Neonate back, but he realized that he couldn't. "Grim Demon, what's going on?" Zhou looked at Grim Demon and asked with a frown. I'm not too sure either. I already said to let you go." Giving His Excellency random food. Something must have happened. Grim Demon wasn't sure what was going on. Zhou used Truth Listener to scan Demonic Neonate's body and didn't discover any problems. It was as though she was really asleep. "Gotcha!" The stone platform beneath their feet suddenly shook. Zhou and Grim Demon hurriedly flew up. The stone platform with the silver-haired girl lying on it slowly sank. Chapter 1529. He watched as the stone platform slowly sank. Beneath the stone platform was a bottomless abyss. There was no light in the deep hole below. Even his gaze seemed to be devoured. As the stone platform descended, The figure of the girl lying on the stone platform gradually became blurry. Zhou was sizing up the bottomless pit below when he suddenly saw the girl open her eyes and smile strangely at him. She opened her mouth as though she was saying something. However, Zhou didn't hear anything, nor did he know what she was saying. Zhou couldn't help but tremble. The girl and the stone platform had already sunk into the bottomless abyss and were nowhere to be seen. Was that an illusion? Zhou wasn't sure if he had really seen the girl open her eyes and speak. However, Zhou remembered the pair of silver pupils and the strange smile very clearly. It shouldn't be an illusion, right? Zhou tried his best to recall the girl's lips, trying to guess what she was saying. However, before Zhou could think carefully, it was as though there was an earthquake. The entire building collapsed. The 7 devils glared at Zhou and jumped into the bottomless abyss. In the blink of an eye, the 7 devils vanished. Zhou and Grim Demon didn't dare take the risk of jumping down. All they could do was escape the building. Not long after they left, the building completely collapsed as though it had been sucked into a bottomless abyss. Soon, even the ruins vanished. The bottomless abyss-like cave vanished. The spot where the building was had turned into a pit. Soon, flowers that didn't age or die grew in the pit, as though the building and the bottomless abyss had never existed. Grim Demon, did you see the girl open her eyes just now? Zhou asked Grim Demon. No. When did she open her eyes? Grim Demon asked in puzzlement. Not long after the stone platform sank into the hole and was about to fade into the darkness, she seemed to open her eyes and say something. Didn't you see it? Zhou recounted in detail. Did you see wrongly? I stared at her from beginning to end. Until she disappeared, I didn't see her open her eyes, much less say a word. Grim Demon said with certainty. Zhou frowned in silence. Although he felt a little dazed at that instant, as though he was dreaming, his brain still remembered it very clearly. It was unlikely that he had seen wrongly. Grim Demon didn't see it, so Zhou didn't ask further. He looked at demonic neonate in his arms. She was still sleeping, looking very soundly. Her lips were still sucking on her thumb. We have to think of a way to return. Zhou looked around, hoping to find a way to return to Earth. Zhou had been to the dimension once before, but with the Ice Maiden leading the way, he knew how to return. However, he didn't know how to return now. I think we should stay here and wait for His Excellency to wake up. It might be more dangerous to run around in such a place, Grim Demon said. Zhou naturally knew that Grim Demon was right, but who knew when demonic neonate would wake up? If demonic neonate was really evolving, according to Zhou's previous experience, the higher the level of a companion beast, the longer it took for it to evolve. The time it took for a companion beast to advance to the Terrorgrade was considered short. If it was long, it might even take a few months. Zhou couldn't wait and do nothing. There was still an endless sea of flowers around him. Apart from that, there was nothing else. Apart from flowers, there was no vitality in the world. The vitality of the flowers was very strange to begin with. They looked full of vitality, but they also had a deathly aura that resembled ash. Grim Demon, what else do you know about the land of the fallen? Zhou asked Grim Demon. I don't think so. All right, I seem to remember hearing an angel say, the land of the fallen is also called Paradise Lost. It's a place where there's eternal misfortune and no happiness. Grim Demon said as he tried his best to recall. When Zhou heard the words Paradise Lost, he thought of a mythical epic called Paradise Lost. The story told and it was related to Satan. After Satan was defeated, he was sent to hell by God, but Satan wasn't willing to accept defeat. He waited for an opportunity to take revenge. Once, Satan finally found an opportunity to transform into a snake and enter the Garden of Eden. He tempted Adam and Eve to eat the forbidden fruit. In the end, Adam and Eve were chased out of the Garden of Eden. This was only a mythical epic. Even if the Garden of Eden really existed, it was hard to say if there were Adam and Eve. Is Sweetie living in the Garden of Eden? Zhou suddenly thought of Tian Tian, but he couldn't connect Tian Tian's image with the omnipotent God. Grim Demon recalled some information he had heard, but it wasn't of any help to Zhou Wen and company's present situation. He still couldn't think of a way to leave. Hell is a prison used to imprison devils. Even in the dimension, this is an extremely special place. It's definitely not that easy to leave this place. Let's wait for His Excellency to wake up before making any plans. Grim Demon tried his best to persuade Zhou Wen not to act rashly. Zhou Wen wasn't afraid of loneliness. It wasn't a problem to stay here for a few years, but something could happen in Guide City at any time. Zhou Wen was afraid that Li Xian and company wouldn't be able to handle it. After pondering for a moment, Zhou Wen walked in a direction with demonic neonate in his arms. He decided to give it another try. However, the moment Zhou Wen walked, he discovered something very magical. When he walked forward, the flowers in front of him automatically parted and made way. These flowers can move on their own? Then why haven't I seen them move before? Zhou Wen attempted to walk in another direction. However, no matter which direction Zhou Wen walked in, the flowers in front of him would automatically make way as though they were avoiding him. Zhou Wen glanced at demonic neonate in his arms and said to Grim Demon, "Walk in the other direction." Grim Demon walked in another direction, but the flowers didn't make way for him. Catch! Zhou Wen handed demonic neonate to Grim Demon and gave it a try himself. The outcome was the same as Grim Demon's. The flowers didn't make way for him. Now, it was very obvious that the flowers were making way for demonic neonate. This didn't happen when I summoned demonic neonate previously. From the looks of it, it's because demonic neonate ate that gem. Zhou Wen thought for a moment before carrying demonic neonate and continuing walking forward. Wherever Zhou Wen, or rather, demonic neonate, went, the flowers would make way, forming a flower path. Zhou Wen walked along the flower path. After walking for a short while, Zhou Wen and Grim Demon were surprised to discover that they had reached the end of the sea of flowers. In the distance, they could see a continuous mountain range. At the foot of the mountain, there was smoke curling up. A small city was located at the foot of the mountain. Chapter 1530. Humans. There are humans there? From afar, Zhou Wen saw that there were humans in the small city. Furthermore, there were quite a number of them. Zhou Wen used Truth Listener to carefully sweep the area a few more times. After confirming that the other party was a human and not a humanoid dimensional creature, he looked at Grim Demon and asked, "Grim Demon, are you sure this is the land of the fallen of the dimension?" This. Grim Demon was originally very certain, but when he saw the humans in the city, he wasn't sure. A creature that could survive in a dimension had to be at least at the mythical stage. How many mythical creatures were there among humans? In the small city in front of him, there seemed to be at least 100,000 people. It was unknown if the entire Earth Federation could gather so many mythical humans. Furthermore, the small city was right next to the land of the fallen. Ignoring humans, even powerful dimensional creatures wouldn't choose to build a city in such a place. Seeing that Grim Demon wasn't sure, Zhou Wen immediately walked towards the small city. The sea of flowers ended at the cliff. Below was a bottomless abyss, and on the other side of the cliff was a continuous mountain range. The small city was built on the mountain opposite. There was no path from here to the small city opposite. However, the bottomless abyss wasn't a problem for Zhou Wen and Grim Demon. They could easily fly over. For safety reasons, Zhou Wen even released musical note sprites to probe. In the end, musical note sprites flew freely in the air and didn't discover any danger. Only then did Zhou Wen fly towards the human city opposite with demonic neonate in his arms. The city was built on a mountain. On the side, facing the cliff, there was a door. Outside the door was a platform. Some humans were setting up stalls on the platform. It was a bustling market with quite a number of people. When Zhou Wen flew over with demonic neonate in his arms, he didn't use his terror transformation to hide himself. It wasn't that he didn't want to hide, but that demonic neonate couldn't. It was useless even if he hid. Soon, many people saw Zhou Wen fly over with demonic neonate in his arms. As for Grim Demon, most people couldn't see him due to his terror transformation. Those who saw Zhou Wen stood up and widened their eyes as they stared blankly at Zhou Wen. who was flying toward the platform. It was as though they had seen something unbelievable. All of them widened their eyes and wore horrified expressions as they stood rooted to the ground in a daze. Anyone who saw Zhou Wen had the same expression. The vendors stopped talking, and the buyers forgot what they were holding as all of them looked at Zhou Wen. "May I know where you are?" Zhou Wen flew close to the platform and greeted before asking. He had a feeling that there was something wrong with this city and these humans, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Ah. At this time, the people seemed to wake up from a dream, as if they had seen something terrifying. One by one, they turned around and fled into the city. Some people even threw the things in their hands out. Instantly, the market was in chaos. By the time Zhou Wen snapped to his senses, the huge market was already empty. The ground was a mess. "Do I look that terrifying?" Zhou Wen touched his face and asked Grim Demon. "Compared to me, you are a little uglier, but it's not to the point of being frightening. The residents of this small city are too inexperienced. They haven't seen anything uglier. It's nothing out of the ordinary," Grim Demon said smugly. If demonic neonate could still move, Zhou Wen would have gotten demonic neonate to retract Grim Demon into the demonic sword. This fellow was born shameless. Zhou Wen carried demonic neonate and walked into the city. When the humans realized that he had followed them into the city, they were horrified. All of them fled with all their might. Even the humans in the city who didn't know what had happened were scrambling to escape. The owners of the shops on both sides of the road closed their doors and closed their windows tightly. After a while, there was no one left on the long street, and it was littered with trash. Are these people's brains broken? Zhou Wen took out a mirror and looked at himself. He didn't discover anything about himself that was worth being afraid of. He had one nose and two eyes. He looked the same as them, a normal human. Are the humans in this city mentally ill? What's there to be afraid of when they see a human? Grim Demon clearly found it odd. They aren't mentally ill. They're just afraid of something. Zhou Wen frowned in thought. Before he could figure out a reason, he saw the people who had fled on the other end of the long street walk back, trembling in fear. The leader was an old man with white hair and beard. His beard almost reached his waist, and he held a cane in his hand. He didn't look stable when he walked, as though he would fall at any moment. Many people followed behind the elder and walked towards Zhou Wen and company. Their eyes were filled with fear, but despite their fear, they still followed the elder slowly. Zhou Wen stood on the long street and waited for them to walk over. Since they were willing to come, it meant that they could still communicate. All he needed to do was clarify the matter. Although they were in a dimension, they were all humans after all. They should be easier to communicate with than dimensional creatures. Although the elder's eyes were filled with fear, he still walked over step by step. When he was dozens of meters away from Zhou Wen and couldn't communicate face to face, the elder suddenly threw away his cane and fell to the ground, bowing at Zhou Wen. With the elder's bow, the crowd behind him bowed as well. "Your Excellency, please spare that child's life. If you want to eat her, eat me." The elder kowtowed as he said with tears streaming down his face. What's going on? Zhou Wen was dumbfounded. How did he become some demon king? Furthermore, he was only hugging demonic neonate in such a gentle posture. It didn't look like he wanted to eat her. Are these people's brains flooded with water? Zhou Wen looked at the people who were worshipping him and begging him not to eat the child. Zhou Wen now agreed with Grim Demon's point of view. Perhaps these people were really crazy. Zhou Wen felt that it was clearly very difficult to explain to a bunch of lunatics that he wasn't a demon king or that he wouldn't eat children. Therefore, he planned on going along with their words and figuring out the situation. "How do you know I'm a demon king?" Zhou Wen asked the white-haired elder. The white-haired elder's body trembled, but he quickly answered respectfully, "Apart from you, Your Excellency, who else can come out of Lost Paradise? Apart from you, who else can transform into such a human?" Zhou Wen opened his mouth and suddenly realized that it wasn't easy to explain. These people didn't seem to believe him, even if he said he was human. Chapter 1531. I know who these people are. Grim Demon suddenly shouted. Zhou looked at Grim Demon. As Grim Demon had been in his terror form the entire time, the others couldn't see him. Therefore, the elder and the group of people only saw Zhou turn his head to the side as though he was staring at the void. This made them even more panicked as they found Zhou incomprehensible and unpredictable. He was definitely the great demon king of the Lost Paradise. They call this place Paradise Lost, not the land of the fallen, nor is it hell. If this place is really related to the myth of Paradise Lost, then it's not difficult to guess the origins of these people. Adam and Eve were tempted by Satan to eat the forbidden fruit and were chased out of the Garden of Eden. If this story doesn't happen on Earth, but in a dimension, then all of this can be explained, Grim Demon said. Zhou immediately understood what Grim Demon was getting at. Grim Demon was trying to say that these people were actually the descendants of Adam and Eve. However, on second thought, Zhou felt that something was amiss. In the myths and legends of God, Adam and Eve should be the ancestors of humanity. According to Grim Demon's guess, it didn't match. If Adam and Eve had reproduced here after being chased out of the Garden of Eden, they had never been to Earth. How could there be such legends on Earth? As though seeing through Zhou's thoughts, Grim Demon said, Adam and Eve betrayed God and ate the forbidden fruit. After being chased out, where could they go? Apart from a place like the Garden of Eden, the dimension isn't suitable for humans to survive. The only place they can leave is probably the Lost Paradise. You can tell from their bodies that there are no mythical humans among them. They are all legendary or epic, as you humans call them. For such a standard to build a city in a dimension, it's only possible if they're next to the Lost Paradise and receive its protection. Zhou knew that Grim Demon was right. He could already vaguely sense the nomological powers of the dimension in this tiny mountain city, but compared to the true dimensional laws Zhou had sensed, it was much weaker. Clearly, this place was affected by the Lost Paradise, which was why these humans were able to survive here. However, this was only Grim Demon's guess. Perhaps these humans were brought over from Earth by dimensional experts as experimental subjects. It was even possible that some humans on Earth had some fortuitous encounter and came here by accident. Are you the king of this city? Zhou stared at the elder and asked. The elder waited for a while, but Zhou didn't say a word. He felt uneasy as he guessed what the Demon King was up to. When he suddenly heard Zhou's question, he jumped in fright. He prostrated on the ground and said in fear and trepidation, Your Majesty, you are the only king. I'm only the city lord of this city and also your slave. If you need a life sacrifice, please take my life away and leave that child's life. Since you know that I'm the only king here, then tell me, who gave you the courage to negotiate with me? Zhou thought to himself, instead of wasting my breath explaining, I might as well use my identity as the Infernal King to figure things out. Everyone was immediately alarmed and afraid. The elder kowtowed repeatedly. Your Majesty, we definitely have no intention of offending you, nor do we dare negotiate with you. We just hope to obtain your pity. Our ancestors were able to survive here because of your mercy. Our lives belong to you, and everything here belongs to you. We don't have the qualifications to negotiate with you. We only hope that you'll be merciful, Your Excellency Demon King. As Zhou listened to the elder's nagging, he increasingly felt that Grim Demon's guess might be right. These people might really be the descendants of Adam and Eve. Take me to see this city, Zhou said indifferently to the elder's pleas. Yes, Your Majesty. I'll lead the way. What do you want to see? The elder hurriedly said. What do you think? Zhou glanced at him indifferently. The elder immediately broke out into a cold sweat as his mind raced. Soon, he seemed to think of something and hurriedly said, Your Majesty, I understand. Please follow me. The elder crouched down and led the way. The others hurriedly retreated to the sides of the road, not daring to stand in front of Zhou. The style of this city resembled the ancient style of the West District. Zhou remembered that it was called Gothic architecture. Furthermore, it was obvious that this place was very backward. There were no electronic devices, not even electric lights. Clearly, the technology here was almost zero. When he walked to the middle of the city, Zhou was surprised to discover that there was a Rubik's Cube here. Just like the Rubik's Cube on Earth, the Rubik's Cube here also displayed the image of the W star. There's actually a Rubik's Cube here. That's easy. I just need to pass through the Rubik's Cube and reach the W star before teleporting back to Earth. Zhou was delighted at first, but he immediately rejected this method. It was true that he could reach the W star through the Rubik's Cube, but to do so, he had to clear the W star dimensional zone. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to leave. Back in the Venus dimensional zone, someone had already verified that as long as one entered a dimensional zone through the Rubik's Cube, they could only fight to the death. Unless they cleared it, there was no possibility of leaving. The elder didn't know what Zhou was thinking. He hunched his body and led the way, not daring to look back at Zhou. Since Zhou didn't say a word, he didn't dare speak casually. Although this small city was ancient, it was filled with an artistic aura. There were many carvings on the buildings, and there were statues everywhere. There were humans and statues of strange creatures. After walking for a while, the elder brought Zhou into a garden. There were many flowers and plants planted in the garden, making it look very beautiful. Toward the back of the garden stood 2 tombstones. Zhou didn't recognize the words on them. When Grim Demon saw them, he immediately shouted, "Indeed, these fellows are the descendants of Adam and Eve. That's Adam and Eve's tombstone. Your Majesty, my ancestors are your friends. Unfortunately, they don't have the great power of eternal life like you. They can only be buried here." As the elder spoke, he felt abnormally uneasy, unsure if his guess was right. If he guessed wrongly and angered the Demon King, he didn't know what the consequences would be. "All of you, get out," Zhou said coldly. "Yes, your Majesty." The elder glanced at the demonic neonate in Zhou's arms, but he didn't dare say anything disobedient. He led his men out and closed the door to the garden. "I knew it. Those fellows are the descendants of Adam and Eve," Grim Demon said smugly to Zhou. Chapter 1532. Don't you find it a little strange? Zhou said as he looked at the 2 tombstones. What's strange about it? Why can't I tell? Grim Demon looked left and right, but he didn't see any problems. I don't know the words on the tombstone. Just as you said, one tombstone belongs to Adam and the other belongs to Eve. That's right, right? Zhou said as he pointed at the tombstone. That's right. Grim Demon nodded. That's strange. Aren't they husband and wife? Shouldn't husband and wife be buried together? Why are they buried in 2 graves and erected 2 tombstones? Zhou said. Grim Demon wasn't human, so he wasn't very sensitive about this matter. However, he had seen humans buried together in the past. It was indeed as Zhou had said. He found it somewhat strange. Why don't we dig up this grave and see if it's Adam and Eve inside? Grim Demon said as he stared at the tombstone. I'm not interested in knowing if it's Adam and Eve inside. I just want to know how we can return to Earth. Zhou wasn't in the mood to verify if Adam and Eve were there. The spatial teleportation ability of the Singularity universe couldn't be used between the dimension and Earth's universe. If he wanted to return, apart from using the Rubik's Cube, he could only return to the buffer zone between Earth's universe and the dimension like Zhou did last time. However, without the Ice Maiden leading the way, Zhou didn't know how he could reach there. Even if she was still there, he was willing to lead the way. This wasn't where the Ice Maiden used to be. It was hard to say if he could return. Zhou could sense that the further he was from the Sea of Flowers, the greater the influence of the dimensional laws. In the mountain range, behind the city, the dimensional forces became stronger. Don't ask me. It's useless even if you ask. I've only been to the dimension before I was born, Grim Demon said as he spread his hands. Zhou thought to himself, then aren't you spouting nonsense? The Guardians were created by the dimension. All the Guardians came from the dimension when they were in the cocoon state. As Zhou was thinking, he suddenly felt his phone vibrate. He extended it to take a look and realized that the dungeon he had downloaded had finally been downloaded successfully. This dungeon sure took a long time to download. Zhou clicked on the desktop and searched for the newly generated dungeon. After searching the table for a while, he was surprised to find that no auxiliary star instance dungeon had been generated. The new instance dungeon had a picture of the Big Dipper, and the name written below it was Big Dipper. It can't be. It took so long to download all the Big Dipper. Zhou was alarmed as he hurriedly opened the dungeon and let the blood-colored avatar enter. After entering the dungeon, Zhou immediately recognized it. This was the W-Star dungeon that Tyrannosaurus had previously entered. Could it be that the W-dimensional zone that appeared this time isn't a single-planet dimensional zone? The entire Big Dipper is a large multi-planet dimensional zone? The more Zhou thought about it, the more he felt that he was right. Since he was already in, Zhou summoned the golden flood dragon scissors and the golden sniper. At the same time, he got Tyrant Behemoth to charge over and smash open the door to the W-Star Palace. Inside the palace, there was indeed a creature that was identical to the one in real life. It wore purple crystal armor and sat inside the palace. However, its appearance in the game was cartoonish and looked cuter. It didn't look as realistic as it did in real life. Tyrant Behemoth had already rushed in, but Zhou knew very well that Tyrant Behemoth's current strength wasn't enough to fight the W-Star creature. Therefore, when Tyrant Behemoth rushed in front of the purple crystal armor, Zhou secretly got the golden flood dragon scissors to fly over. He held the sniper rifle's trigger and fired at the purple crystal armor at the palace entrance. Tyrant Behemoth was the first to arrive in front of the purple crystal armor. It opened its mouth to swallow it. The purple crystal armor finally moved. It raised its hand and pressed down. Immediately, terrifying purple light shot out in all directions, instantly forming an omnipresent explosion of light. The blood-colored avatar, standing at the door, was instantly killed as the game screen darkened. This attack is a little too strong. It's clearly an area of effect attack, but the dragon-imprisoned armor on me failed to defend against it at all. I was instantly killed. Zhou frowned in thought. Although he had been instantly killed, Zhou still obtained a lot of information. This was all thanks to his disqualified ability. From the information I obtained when I died, the power that killed the blood-colored avatar should be a high-temperature power. Furthermore, it's accompanied by terrifying radiation. The lethality of this radiation isn't weaker than high temperature. It might even be the main reason why the blood-colored avatar died instantly. As Zhou recalled the feeling of death, he made a deduction. After studying it for a while, Zhou felt that the Chaos Egg should be able to withstand the attack for a short period of time. However, it was useless. He still had to kill the dimensional creature. I'll give it another try. Zhou dripped his blood to revive and entered the W-Star dungeon again. To Zhou's surprise, he really entered. The W-Star dungeon didn't have a time limit. He could enter at any time. That's easy. I'll die a few more times and obtain enough information. It shouldn't be difficult to kill it. With the golden flood dragon scissors in hand, Zhou still had a chance. After entering the dungeon again, Zhou summoned the golden flood dragon scissors and got it to rush into the palace. Zhou hid in the Chaos Egg. His current mission wasn't to help, but to ensure that he wouldn't be killed. Otherwise, once he died, no matter how strong the golden flood dragon scissors was, it would be useless. It would disappear with him. The golden flood dragon scissors transformed into a golden beam of light that shot towards the amethyst-armored creature. The creature raised its palm again as a purple explosion of light instantly filled the entire dimensional zone. The Chaos Egg immediately produced a large number of solid essence energy crystals, nearly causing it to explode. Zhou hurriedly transferred the solid essence energy crystals to Tyrant Behemoth. Zhou constantly moved as solid essence energy crystals were constantly produced. Zhou tried his best, but the Chaos Egg was still on the verge of exploding. After holding on for a second, the light explosion weakened. Only then did Zhou heave a long sigh of relief. It had only been a second, but it was too long for him. If he had held on for another 10 seconds, he really didn't know if the Chaos Egg could hold on. Clang! A terrifying collision sound came from the palace. At the same time, another explosion of light occurred. Before Zhou, one could figure out the situation inside. The Chaos Egg produced a large number of solid essence energy crystals again. All Zhou one could do was frantically move them again and use sky stealing to feed the solid essence energy crystals to Tyrant Behemoth. The two terrifying existences in the palace fought, but Zhou one didn't even have the chance to watch. All he could do was try his best to survive. Only by surviving would the golden flood dragon scissors have a chance of killing the amethyst armored creature. Chapter 1533. Bam! The Chaos Egg exploded. Too many solid essence energy crystals couldn't be transferred in time, so the Chaos Egg eventually exploded. The phone screen went black and the game ended. However, Zhou obtained a lot of information. What satisfied Zhou the most was that although the Chaos Egg had exploded in-game, Tyrant Behemoth had devoured many solid essence energy crystals before it exploded. It was showing signs of evolution. As he couldn't find a way to leave the dimension for the time being, Zhou decided to constantly grind the Dubhe Star Dungeon. If he could clear the Dubhe Star Dungeon, he might be able to use the Magic Cube to return to Earth. However, if he wanted to use the Magic Cube to return to Earth, there was still a problem that needed to be resolved. To use the Magic Cube to enter the Dubhe Star Dungeon, for people had to drip their blood on the Magic Cube. Now that Zhou was alone, he had to find 3 more people to enter with him. As Zhou gamed, he used Truth Listener's ability to monitor the conversations of the people in the city. It didn't take long for Zhou to gain a good understanding of the situation in the city. This city built on a mountain was called Regretless City. Grim Demon was right. Back then, after Adam and Eve were expelled from the Garden of Eden, they had nowhere to go. It was Satan who showed them a way to survive. They settled beside the lost paradise. After generations of reproduction, Regretless City had its present scale. In fact, in the beginning, there were only a few caves. Although these humans were born in the dimension, they looked no different from humans on Earth. Even their physical flaws were the same. No one could advance to the mythical stage with their own strength. Therefore, the strongest human in the city was only at the epic stage. To be able to survive here, apart from the protection of the lost paradise, they also needed to earn daily necessities. They were humans, not gods. They had to eat and drink every day. However, they didn't dare enter the lost paradise. Even if they entered, there was nothing to eat other than flowers. Therefore, the people of Regretless City could only head to the mountain range to search for food. However, as the power of the dimension grew stronger after entering the mountain range, ordinary citizens couldn't withstand it at all. Therefore, the places they could reach were very close. According to the information Zhou had heard, their food was the plants in the forest. Furthermore, there was something strange. In a mountain range, there was a plant whose leaves couldn't be plucked no matter how hard they tried. However, it wasn't something that could be seen at all times. It was considered lucky to see it occasionally. While Zhou was studying these things, Grim Demon wasn't idle either. He kept studying the tombstone, hoping to find some clues. However, the words on the tombstone didn't have any flaws. Grim Demon studied them for a long time, but failed to find any problems. In the end, Killer Demon made up his mind and decided to dig up Eve's grave first. Zhou clearly didn't like digging up someone's ancestral grave. Grim Demon was afraid that Zhou would stop him, so he didn't inform Zhou. While Zhou wasn't paying attention, he dug directly. He pushed the tombstone away, revealing the sarcophagus below. Grim Demon decisively lifted the lid of the sarcophagus. Zhou was eavesdropping on the conversation between the elder and his friend when he suddenly heard Grim Demon shout. He hurriedly turned his head and realized that Grim Demon had opened Eve's sarcophagus. At that moment, Grim Demon's expression was somewhat complicated. He stared intently at the sarcophagus as though he had seen something strange. "What's inside?" Zhou walked to Grim Demon's side and followed his gaze. When he saw what was inside the sarcophagus, he was immediately taken aback. There was no corpse inside the sarcophagus, not even a skeleton. There was only one thing inside. What's this? Why is there this? Zhou realized that inside the sarcophagus was a puppet that looked like a princess. This puppet was very big, almost the size of a real person. She wore a princess dress and was placed in the sarcophagus, looking like she was asleep. No one could answer him. Grim Demon was also confused. Guardians don't eat graves. You should ask yourself, under what circumstances would you place such a thing in your grave? Open Adam's tombstone and take a look, Zhou said to Grim Demon. Grim Demon pushed Adam's tombstone open, and indeed, he saw the sarcophagus inside. When he opened the sarcophagus, there was indeed a puppet inside. However, this time, it was a puppet that looked like a boy. He wore a tuxedo and looked very gentlemanly. These are clearly two puppets. There are no corpses inside. In other words, this place can't be Adam and Eve's grave, Grim Demon said. Zhou carefully scanned the sarcophagus with Truth Listener. Apart from the two puppets, he didn't discover anything. That's strange. If the real Adam and Eve didn't die of old age here, where did they go? Are the people in Regretless City their descendants? Zhou was filled with doubts. Grim Demon wanted to take out the two puppets to take a closer look, but no matter how hard he tried, the puppets inside remained motionless. There's something wrong with these two puppets. With my strength, it wouldn't be difficult to take them out even if they were made of gold, much less puppets. As Grim Demon spoke, he suddenly screamed and fell to the ground. Grim Demon, what's wrong? Zhou watched as Grim Demon collapsed beside the tombstone, motionless as though he was dead. He was immediately alarmed and didn't dare go over. All he did was shout Grim Demon's name. However, after shouting a few times, Grim Demon didn't respond at all. I've already said that digging up graves is inauspicious. It's very easy for something to happen, but you didn't listen. You insisted on digging. Zhou looked at the two puppets with an odd expression. He summoned the Golden Battle God and got them to restore the grave. Zhou didn't dare approach. After closing the coffin lid and pushing the grave back to its original spot, the Golden Battle God wasn't attacked, but Grim Demon remained motionless. It was useless no matter how Zhou shouted. Even if he electrocuted him or hit him with ice, there was no reaction. However, Grim Demon's vitality wasn't severed. It didn't seem like he was dead. After a while, Grim Demon crawled up in a daze. What happened just now? Grim Demon asked Zhou after he sobered up a little. I should be asking you that. Zhou recounted how he had suddenly fallen to the ground. After Grim Demon heard that, his expression turned nasty. How did this happen? I don't have any memories. Chapter 1534. It's best not to touch this thing. Zhou didn't wish to be nosy as he exhorted Grim Demon not to touch anything. Grim Demon still had a lingering fear. Even if he were to touch it again, he wouldn't dare do so. This place should be relatively safe. We'll stay here for a while. Go and find out what's on the other side of the mountain. Zhou got Grim Demon to scout for information while he gamed in the cemetery. With a large number of solid essence energy crystals feeding it, it wouldn't take long for Tyrant Behemoth to advance to the Calamity stage. After Grim Demon left, Zhou grinded the Dubhe Star Palace again and again. Although he still couldn't withstand the purple explosion of light, he gained a better understanding of the purple crystal armored creature's abilities. Unless the Chaos Egg can advance to the Calamity grade, it will be very difficult for it to withstand the power of the explosion of light. I have to think of other solutions. Zhou was thinking of a way to kill the purple crystal armored creature in a short period of time. In that case, it didn't matter even if the Chaos Egg couldn't last long. As he pondered, he moved the solid essence energy crystals into Tyrant Behemoth's mouth, but he suddenly couldn't move them. Before Zhou could figure out what was going on, the Chaos Egg exploded. Without entering the dungeon again, Zhou clicked open Tyrant Behemoth's information and realized that it had indeed entered an evolutionary state. Without a glutton like Tyrant Behemoth carrying it, There's no companion beast that can digest so many essence energy crystals. The chaos egg can last even shorter. It was a good thing for Tyrant Behemoth to evolve into a calamity, but before it successfully advanced, Zhou could only think of other solutions. Zhou looked at demonic neonate. She had been sleeping the entire time, looking like a normal person sleeping. There were no signs of a companion beast evolving, but he couldn't wake her up no matter how hard he tried. However, Grim Demon returned after a while. It was unknown what method he had used, but he had already figured out the situation here. The people of Regretless City didn't dare go too far from it. Their food was only some plants on the mountain. Some people had once gone into the mountain range, but most of them died inside. They didn't even know how they died. From the looks of it, there are terror-grade creatures in the mountain range. They are only ordinary people, so they naturally can't see terror-grade creatures. Grim Demon paused before continuing. However, someone once saw a terrifying scene in the mountain range. Countless snakes were swimming in the mountains. Among them, a scarlet snake was coiled on a mountain peak. Its body was even larger than the mountain peak. According to their descriptions, it looks like the snake that Satan transformed into when he tempted Adam and Eve. It's not easy to leave the mountain range. Even if we successfully leave, we might not be able to find the way back. Let's stay here for now. When baby wakes up, let's see if she has any way to take us back, Zhou said after some thought. This should have happened long ago. Grim Demon paused for a moment before saying, when I was reading the memories of the citizens, I also discovered something. Although this place is protected by the Lost Paradise, it's not in the Lost Paradise after all. Occasionally, dimensional creatures will come to the city and eat many people. It's probably because of those snakes. From the looks of it, this place isn't safe either. I hope Neonate can wake up as soon as possible. Zhou felt that demonic Neonate should have a way to take them back. After all, the Heaven Shrouding Bell was in demonic Neonate's hands. Previously, Ice Maiden had used the Heaven Shrouding Bell to travel through space and reach the buffer zone between Earth's universe and the dimension. Zhou continued gaming and grinding dungeons. Grim Demon couldn't even find someone to talk to, as he was extremely anxious in the cemetery. In less than 2 days, Grim Demon couldn't help but tell Zhou that he wanted to explore the depths of the mountain range to see if there was any other way out. After Grim Demon left, Zhou continued grinding dungeons every day. This day, after killing the golden sniper again, he suddenly heard a ding. The sound was different from the usual sound of dimensional crystals dropping. It didn't sound like a companion egg. Reincarnation stone. Zhou was overjoyed when he saw what it was. After grinding for so long, this was the second Samsara stone. The previous one had been used by the great Might Vajrabul. Back then, Zhou didn't know what the Samsara stone was for and was only experimenting. Now, Zhou already knew that the Samsara stone could allow companion beasts that couldn't evolve to have evolvable stats. Furthermore, their stats might be strengthened to a certain extent, and they might even awaken some new skills. Zhou had many good companion beasts, but because they didn't have evolvable stats, their levels couldn't be raised. They couldn't satisfy Zhou's current needs. He couldn't bear to use such rare, special pets for fusion. If they weren't suitable, it was useless to keep them. With the Samsara stone, those companion beasts could be saved. Let me see which companion beast should I use it on. There were quite a number of companion beasts that Zhou hoped to improve, but there was only one Samsara stone. He had to choose. The Death Reporting Crow skill is actually very useful. If I use the Samsara stone on it, it might be able to evolve into a powerful companion beast. Medusa isn't bad either. It doesn't seem to be of much use now, but if it evolves, her skill might be especially powerful. There's also the ancient splitting tadpole. If it can evolve to the calamity grade, I wonder how strong its splitting and explosion ability will be. Zhou tidied up his companion beasts and realized that there were too many companion beasts that needed the Samsara stone. He was momentarily at a loss. After some consideration, Zhou finally chose to give the Samsara stone to Dr. Darkness. Zhou actually liked Dr. Darkness's skills very much. Furthermore, he was in his soul form, and could attach himself to Zhou. All his skills could be used by Zhou. However, his level was too low. It couldn't keep up with Zhou's current level and combat needs. Furthermore, he didn't have any evolvable stats. Zhou had always wanted to raise his level. Then I'll use Dr. Darkness. Zhou summoned Dr. Darkness and gave him the Samsara Stone. After using the Samsara Stone, Dr. Darkness's body immediately underwent a magical change. Instead of calling it a change, it was better to call it a metamorphosis. The mythical Dr. Darkness rapidly metamorphosed, and before long, he became the most basic mortal stage. The mortal stage Dr. Darkness looked rather adorable. He was a beautiful boy who looked 5 or 6 years old. He didn't have any expression and was like a robot. He wore a black robe and didn't look like a doctor. Instead, he looked like a priest. He opened Dr. Darkness's stats, and indeed, he had returned to the mortal stage. Dr. Darkness, mortal, evolvable, strength, 11 speed, 11 constitution, 11 primordial energy, 11 talent skill, scalpel, fight poison with poison, light of penetration, killer, Doctor Companion form, soul. Chapter 1535. The skills are all there. Furthermore, there's an additional skill, famous Dr. Killer. I wonder what it's used for. How can killing be related to medical skills? Zhou, when carefully read the introduction of famous Dr. Killer. Famous Dr. Killer. Kill one to save one. Save one to kill one. Zhou looked at it for a long time, but he didn't understand what the skill introduction meant. Could it be that if I want to use Dr. Darkness to save people in the future, I have to kill someone first? Isn't that bullshit asterisk T? Zhou felt that this skill definitely wasn't that simple. He wanted to test the consequences of saving people, but there wasn't anyone who needed Dr. Darkness to save. After all, Dr. Darkness mostly used fight poison with poison to save people. Zhou couldn't poison a person first, right? Now that he had companion beasts, raising their levels was still a problem. Previously, the great Might Vajra Bull had returned to the mortal stage. All he needed to do was feed it some essence energy crystals to naturally raise it. Now, it had returned to the mythical stage, but it wasn't that easy to improve further. He temporarily didn't know how to advance to the Terror grade. Zhou tried feeding Dr. Darkness the essence energy crystals. Although it made Dr. Darkness grow a little, the growth wasn't fast. Furthermore, Dr. Darkness could only absorb a small portion of the essence energy crystals. It wasn't of much use, unlike Tyrant Behemoth that could eat it freely. From the looks of it, it's impossible to use essence energy crystals to evolve Dr. Darkness. Then, what does his evolution need? After some thought, Zhou felt that he should give it a try in a poisonous place. Dr. Darkness's skill was related to poison. Apart from that, Zhou couldn't think of any other way to evolve him. In the dungeons that Zhou had already downloaded, there were many poisonous insects and goo in the Valley of No Return. It was probably the most ideal place. Apart from that, there was also the poison WRM pool in Pool City. There was also poison there, so he could give it a try. After some consideration, Zhou chose the poison WRM pool. The water in the poison WRM pool was poisonous, so he used the poisonous water inside to test it. He brought Dr. Darkness to the poison WRM pool. Without waiting for Zhou to experiment, Dr. Darkness walked to the side of the poison WRM pool, took out a syringe, and drew a tube of poison. Then he stabbed it into his vein and injected the poison. Soon, Zhou was surprised to discover that Dr. Darkness had advanced to the legendary stage and obtained his life providence again. His life providence was the same as before Golden Left Hand. If it's so easy to evolve, wouldn't a few more injections allow me to quickly advance to the mythical stage? However, after injecting one vial of poison, Dr. Darkness stopped moving. The poison WRM in the poison WRM pool was alarmed and instantly killed by Zhou. The dimensional creature that looked very powerful in the past felt too weak compared to the present Zhou. After confirming that Dr. Darkness no longer needed the poison here, Zhou had no choice but to take him to another dungeon. Zhou had circled the Zhuolu and Valley of No Return dungeons with poison. Every time Dr. Darkness saw a new poison, he would extract it and inject it into himself. He seemed to have a physique that allowed him to be immune to poison, or even stronger. Others were only immune to poison, but Dr. Darkness could use poison to strengthen his body. Some poisons could make Dr. Darkness evolve, while others didn't have much of a reaction. Furthermore, at the lower levels, he could advance by injecting a random poison. Later on, he had to inject several poisons before he could advance. After working for half a day, Dr. Darkness finally returned to the mythical stage. His life soul and Wheel of Destiny were the same as before. Zhou tried a few more poisons, but none of them could allow Dr. Darkness to continue evolving. Then, he temporarily couldn't find any new poisons, so he couldn't continue experimenting. From the looks of it, ordinary poisons shouldn't be able to make Dr. Darkness evolve to the Terror grade. I have to find some powerful poison elemental creatures and use their poison to make Dr. Darkness evolve. Zhou felt that if he could find a Calamity grade poison elemental creature, he should be able to advance Dr. Darkness to the Terror grade. Where can I find a Calamity creature with poison? Zhou kept thinking of the one in the Zhuolu sapphire sky. However, that dimensional creature had always been the sapphire, making it difficult to kill. Furthermore, he didn't know if it was considered poison. Zhou thought about all the dungeons again, but he couldn't think of a suitable place. Taking this opportunity, Zhou picked out his companion beasts. As low-level companion beasts were no longer of much use, a portion of them could be used as supplementary materials for fusion. As for the very special ones that Zhou found useful and wasn't willing to fuse, he had to think of a way to improve them. It would be best if they could be raised to the Calamity grade. At the very least, they would be at the Terror grade. Otherwise, they would be useless in the current battle. Dr. Darkness has to think of a way to advance. The Evil Spirit King has recently absorbed quite a number of Terror grade creatures. He should be about to advance to the Terror grade. Banana Fairy also has to improve further. Should the Fiend-Armored Tiger Soul General advance again? Zhou enlisted a few companion beasts that he thought highly of and immediately felt a headache coming on. There were too many companion beasts that needed to be advanced. Each of them had their own uniqueness, so he couldn't bear to use any of them as ingredients. What left Zhou, when most conflicted, was the Fiend-Armored Tiger Soul General. This companion beast was really strong, but he couldn't get rid of its Jinx's master skill. Zhou was a little afraid. With the Fiend-Armored Tiger Soul General and Bamboo Blade Companion Beast, the two Lord Nemesis Companion Beasts, Zhou was afraid that he wouldn't be able to withstand them if they advanced to the Calamity grade. However, the Fiend-Armored Tiger Soul General was really useful, especially in stellar-level dungeons. To the Fiend-Armored Tiger Soul General, it was equivalent to fighting on its home turf. In the past, there were definitely many stellar-level dimensional zones. It would be a waste to not use the Fiend-Armored Tiger Soul General. I'll give it a try again. Bamboo Blade's Jinx's master ability is stronger than the Tiger Soul General's. There shouldn't be any problems. It shouldn't be a problem. Zhou hesitated for a while before deciding to advance the Fiend-Armored Tiger Soul General. There were some dimensional zones that required the Fiend-Armored Tiger Soul General to lead the charge. Of course, the main reason was that it was very difficult for other companion beasts to advance. Even if Zhou wanted them to advance, he couldn't advance them immediately. However, the Fiend-Armored Tiger Soul General was different. If he used it for fusion, no matter how low the chances were, it wouldn't explode. In other words, as long as he fused with a Terror grade companion beast, the Fiend-Armored Tiger Soul General had a chance of advancing to the Terror grade. By fusing with a Calamity grade companion beast, the Tiger Soul General could quickly reach the Calamity grade. This ability was something other companion beasts didn't have. Bamboo Blade also had the Jinx's master attribute, but Zhou didn't know if it had this ability. Calamity grade companion beasts were still useful, so Zhou couldn't bear to use them for fusion. All he could do was use a Terror grade companion beast to raise the Tiger Soul General to the Terror grade. Which one should I use for fusion? Zhou looked at all the Terror grade companion beasts he had. The least valuable Terragrade companion beast was the Golden Battle God, but the Golden Battle God skill wasn't suitable for the Fiend-armored Tiger Soul General. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.